Imagine it's late at night. Perhaps you're already in bed. The world around you has quieted down, and the only sound is the soft rhythm of your breath. Maybe you're in Lahore, perhaps in London, or tucked away in a quiet apartment somewhere. In New York, wherever you are, let's drift together into a slower time, a time of lantern light, rough wooden floors, and whispered prayers in the dark. Tonight, we're going to visit a place most people would prefer to forget. A civil war. Field hospital. But don't worry, this journey won't be loud or jarring. No harsh sounds of battle here, just the calm unfolding of memory, one quiet layer at a time. Have you ever wondered what it was like to be the person who stayed behind the front lines? Not to fight, but to patch the fighters back together? To hold someone's wrist gently between your fingers and check for a fading pulse, knowing you might be the last living hand they feel? That's what we're exploring tonight. So before we begin, take a deep breath and let your shoulders relax. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We tell strange but gentle histories here, the kind you listen to when sleep is near. Feel free to close your eyes or keep them half open, softly resting on the ceiling or the inside of your thoughts. Picture a canvas tent flapping in the humid air of 1863, somewhere in Virginia, or maybe Tennessee. There's a smell, not sharp but heavy whiskey, old sweat, and the faint trace of blood that never really leaves the wood grain of the tables. You're about to step inside that tent, but not as a wounded soldier this time. Tonight, you're someone else. You're the doctor, or maybe the nurse, or even the poor assistant who carries buckets of water back and forth again and again, long after the water turns pink from use. The war has been raging since April 1861. By now, you're used to the distant rumble of cannons in the background, a sound that's somehow become ordinary, like rain on a tin roof. Over 1 million people will die before this is over. That's 3% of the entire population at the time, a number so large it's almost impossible to grasp. But you don't need to grasp it. You just need to be here, in this small moment, helping. The next soldier who's carried in. Field hospitals in the Civil War weren't like hospitals today. They were temporary, makeshift places set up in barns, churches, or even someone's living room if it was close enough to the battlefield. Sometimes the medical tents were just a mile away from the fighting close enough for you to hear the screams before the stretcher bearers even reached you. Imagine setting up your surgical table on an unhinged door laid flat across barrels. Or perhaps you're outside entirely, using the pale light of the afternoon, because candles make everything harder to see. The doctors, if you can call them, that often hadn't expected to treat so many people. They were overwhelmed from the first day. Some were young men, barely finished with their studies. Others were older, worn down already by years of practice, now facing injuries that no textbook had ever prepared them for. There's no germ theory yet. You don't know that bacteria exist. So you move from one patient to the next without washing your hands. Your apron is stiff with dried blood from yesterday, or maybe the day before. You think nothing of it. It's just how things are done. In the South, supplies are running low. Most medicines are manufactured in the North, so Confederate doctors have to get creative. Sometimes women who support the Southern cause sew medicine into the folds of their dresses, smuggling laudanum and quinine past Union blockades. You might have heard about this, or perhaps you're the one who carefully unpicks the stitching to retrieve a tiny vial. Imagine holding that bottle in your hand, knowing it could mean the difference between life and death for the man moaning on the floor beside you. Now, picture the procedures you have to perform. There are no sterile gloves, no clean instruments, and no antiseptics. You might use the same saw to amputate 3 or 4 limbs in a row, wiping it off with a rag between patients, if you remember. If you have time, often you don't. There's always someone new coming in. blood already pooling beneath them. Some days, the line of stretchers never seems to end. You try to ignore the smell of rotting flesh from yesterday's amputations, though it lingers. They say you get used to it after a while, but maybe you never really do. And yet, despite all of this, you keep going. Because if you don't, who will? Imagine what it feels like to hold someone's leg steady while a surgeon saws through the bone. The muscles twitch, even if the patient is unconscious. Chloroform is available, but not always, and sometimes the soldiers think you're not using any anesthesia at all because it's so light, they can still feel the pressure. You try not to think about that too much. You focus instead on the rhythm of your breathing, in and out, like waves on a distant shore. You remember that not long ago, back in the Mexican-American War, the odds of dying from disease were even worse. 7 to 10 soldiers died from infection for everyone who died in battle. In the Civil War, it's only about twice as many died from disease as from bullets. That feels like progress, strangely enough. Your hands are sore from holding surgical tools all day. Your eyes burn from trying to see small pieces of bone and shrapnel in the fading light. But you keep working. Sometimes you hum a tune softly under your breath, not because you're happy, but because the repetition helps you stay calm. The other doctors joke that amputations are the mascot of the war. You laugh politely, but it isn't really funny. You've seen too many piles of discarded limbs to find humor in it anymore. Still, you smile. It's easier than explaining how you feel. Tonight, you're not here to win or lose a battle. You're just here to listen, to rest, and to imagine quietly what it was like for the people who lived through this. Or perhaps you've already started to drift off, halfway between waking and dreaming. That's perfectly fine. We'll continue slowly, softly, one breath at a time, as the story unfolds. When you open your eyes again, you find yourself still standing at the edge of that Civil War field hospital, the air around you thick with humidity, carrying the quiet sounds of distant cannon fire that no longer surprise you. The war outside never really stops, but inside this tent, time moves differently. It stretches and folds, bending around the endless tasks you perform. You glance at the soldiers lying on makeshift beds, some with their eyes open and glassy, others gently murmuring to themselves, lost in delirium. Many are too weak to call out anymore. Their skin has taken on a pale, waxy tone, a mixture of shock, fever, and something else you can't quite name. You move softly among them, careful not to disturb the ones who are finally sleeping. The wounded arrive faster than you can treat them. Some are carried in by fellow soldiers, who drop them onto straw mattresses, or sometimes directly onto the wooden floor, unable to hold the weight any longer. The floors are stained permanently dark from all the blood that has seeped into the cracks. If you look closely, you can still see footprints tracked through the dried pools of yesterday's surgeries. You try not to think about it too much. There's no time for reflection, not when the next patient is already waiting. Sometimes it feels like the hospital itself is alive, breathing slowly beneath the canvas roof, groaning as the wooden beams shift and settle. You become part of that breathing rhythm, inhaling with each bandage tied, exhaling with each suture closed. But not every case gets stitches. Some wounds are beyond that. You've learned to recognize the hopeless ones, the stomach wounds, the chest wounds, the injuries to the skull. Those patients are made comfortable, or at least you try to make them comfortable. You administer laudanum, whisper soft words, and sometimes just sit beside them in silence, knowing they won't see another sunrise. It's a strange kind of mercy, but in these moments, mercy is all you have to give. For the others, the ones with broken arms, shattered legs, or mangled feet, the solution is usually amputation. The word rolls around your mind as you prepare your tools. Amputation. You've said it so many times now that it barely feels real. The saw is already in your hand, its handle warm from use. You run your thumb along the smooth wooden grip, worn down from the countless surgeries you've performed, and you try not to think about how many bones it has cut through. Outside, there's a table stacked with limbs, each one wrapped loosely in cloth, waiting for burial. Sometimes the pile is so high that it topples, and someone has to go out and restack it. It's become a task like any other routine, ordinary, part of the day's work. The other assistants don't even flinch anymore when an arm or leg rolls onto the ground. There's just a quiet sigh, a bending of the knees, and the limb is placed back onto the stack, like firewood. Inside the hospital, you focus on your next patient. You wash the wound with a cloth soaked in whatever clean water you have left, though you know it isn't truly clean. In the north, they might use a sponge, but here in the south, supplies are scarce. The cloth is wrung out and reused again and again because there simply isn't enough to do otherwise. You probe the wound carefully, your fingers searching for fragments of bone or bits of cloth pushed deep into the muscle. The patient moans, but you keep going, whispering reassurances that sound more like lullabies. You know they won't remember your words, but you say them anyway, for your own sake as much as theirs. When you find the bullet, if there's still a bullet, you extract it gently, trying not to cause more damage. Sometimes it slips easily into your hand, like a stone plucked from a river. Other times, it's lodged so deeply that you have to use force, wiggling it back and forth until the flesh loosens its grip. All the while, you keep your face calm, your voice soft, because you know the soldiers are listening, even when they seem too far gone to understand. After the bullet is out, you assess the damage. If the bone is shattered or the arteries are torn beyond repair, there's only one choice left. Amputation again. The word echoes silently in your mind as you tie the tourniquet above the wound. You check for circulation, watching the color drain from the limb, and then you begin. The saw moves back and forth with practiced rhythm, the sound of metal against bone mixing with the patient's ragged breathing. Sometimes they scream, sometimes they don't. Either way, you keep your hands steady. You've learned not to rush, even when you're tired. A smooth cut means a better chance of survival, and you cling to that small hope like a raft in a storm. Once the limb is removed, you inspect the stump. If the bleeding is controlled, you sew the skin closed, leaving enough room for swelling. You know the statistics. About 75% of amputees survive. It's strange to think of that as good news, but in this place, it is. You glance at the pile of discarded limbs again, but only briefly. You don't let your mind linger there for long. More patients are waiting, and the next one is already being brought in. Sometimes you wonder about the soldiers after they leave your care. Do they go back home? Do they wake up years later in the middle of the night, feeling phantom pains where their leg used to be? You've heard them talk about it, the ghost sensations, the itching in feet that no longer exist. You don't know how to fix that. No one does. So you just focus on the present moment. You clean your tools as best you can, though they're never truly clean. The rag you use is already soaked through, but you keep wiping anyway. There's no antiseptic, no alcohol strong enough to kill the invisible things you don't yet understand. You only know that some patients heal and others don't, and you've stopped trying to predict which will be which. The camp itch is spreading among the men, a mysterious rash that no one can explain. Some think it's caused by mites or fleas. Others believe it's the result of bad water or poor hygiene. You treat it with poke root when you can find it. And sometimes you resort to scrubbing the skin raw, hoping to drive out whatever is living there. It's a harsh remedy, but the soldiers beg for relief, and you can't bear to turn them away. Diarrhea and dysentery are everywhere. The soldiers grow thin, their faces hollowing out like dry riverbeds. You administer plugs of opium to those with open bowels, and for the ones who can't go at all, you give blue massa mixture of mercury and chalk that you know is dangerous, but have no choice but to use. Malaria is treated with quinine, if you have it, or turpentine if you don't. Pneumonia gets a mustard plaster, or sometimes just a prayer. You wonder sometimes if anyone will ever look back on this time and understand how little you had to work with. You hope they'll forgive you for the things you couldn't prevent. There are moments in the quiet hours of the night when you allow yourself to think about home, about a warm kitchen, clean sheets, the sound of rain on the roof without the metallic scent of blood in the air. But then someone calls your name, softly, and you return to the present, to the next task, the next patient, the next life hanging in the balance. You wipe your hands on your apron, already stiff with layers of dried fluids, and you prepare yourself to begin again. Outside the tent, the sky is turning from gray to black, but inside, the lanterns keep burning. Your shadow flickers on the canvas wall as you lean over the next soldier, whispering the same soft words you've whispered all day. Rest easy now. We're going to take care of you. And in this quiet, dimly lit world, where life and death hover close together, you continue your work. One breath at a time. The lantern light flickers gently against the canvas walls of the hospital tent as you move to the next patient. Your hands tired but steady, your mind suspended between exhaustion and a strange kind of calm. Outside, the distant sounds of cannon fire have faded into the background hum of crickets and the soft rustling of leaves in the night air. The battlefield sleeps for now, but inside this hospital, there's no such luxury. Here, the work continues. Through every hour, in every shadowed corner, beneath every quiet breath. The soldiers around you are resting as best they can, some dozing in uneasy slumber, others staring into the darkness with eyes that do not seem to blink. You understand that look, the glassy, distant stare of someone who has seen too much, too quickly, and now lives halfway between memory and numbness. You've learned to speak softly in this place, not because you're afraid of waking them, but because you know that loud voices only remind them of gunfire. Softness is safer. You pass by a soldier who whispers names in his sleep, calling out for his mother, his brother, a woman whose name you don't recognize. Another man, his face pale and his lips dry, grips a small cloth doll in his hand. A token from home, something to anchor him in the present. You let him keep it, even though regulations say no personal items in surgery. Some rules are meant to be broken when survival is uncertain. You glance at the bucket near the door, where surgical tools soak in a dark solution meant to clean them, though you know it isn't working. You've stopped believing in true cleanliness. The air is heavy with the scent of sweat, old whiskey, and the iron-rich smell of blood. You breathe it in without thinking, the same way you've done every day since this war began. You don't flinch anymore. You simply exist in this world of muted pain and soft footsteps. Tonight, like so many nights before, you will perform more amputations than you can count. The saw feels like an extension of your arm now, moving back and forth with rhythmic precision. 10 minutes is all it takes to remove a limb if you're experienced, and by now, you're very experienced. Sometimes you wonder if that's something to be proud of or something to mourn. You don't let the thought linger too long. There's no time for that. You wipe your hands on your apron, stiff with dried blood, and move to the next case. A soldier is brought in, his leg shattered by a mini-ball, the conical bullets used in this war that cause massive, ragged wounds. Unlike the round musket, balls of earlier conflicts, mini-balls shatter bones and tear muscles into ribbons. There's no repairing such damage, only removing it. You whisper to the soldier as you prepare the chloroform rag, telling him he's going to sleep now, that when he wakes up, the pain will be gone. You don't mention that his leg will be gone too. He probably already knows. Most of them do. You hold the rag gently over his face, watching his eyelids flutter, his breathing slow. And when he finally goes still, you begin. Your saw moves. Through flesh and bone, your mind retreating to a quiet place where you can focus on the work without letting emotion seep in. You think of yourself not as a healer or a butcher, but as a craftsman, someone whose job is to give these men a chance, however slim, at life beyond the battlefield. You tell yourself this again and again, like a mantra, a lullaby for your own weary heart. When the leg is off, you hand it to an assistant who carries it outside to the growing pile. Some nights, the pile is 4 feet high, a grotesque monument to the realities of war, but no one talks about it anymore. It's just part of the routine now. You sew the stump closed with black silk thread, your fingers moving automatically. You don't need to look at what you're doing. You've done this so many times that your hands know the way without help from your eyes. The thread pulls tight. The skin puckers slightly, and you whisper a soft prayer under your breath, not because you're especially religious, but because the sound of your voice soothes you. The soldier will wake up in an hour or so, groggy from the chloroform, his body lighter by one leg. If he survives the night, his chances are good. But infection is always lurking, a silent predator in the corners of the tent. Hospital gangrene. The surgeons call it a necrotizing disease that eats away at healthy flesh, leaving behind blackened, oozing wounds. Nearly half of the men who get it will die, despite your best efforts. Sometimes you try maggots, letting them feed on the dead tissue in hopes that they'll leave the living parts intact. It's an old remedy, but often the only one that works. The other doctors call it a miracle when it succeeds. You call it luck. You rinse your hands in the bucket again, knowing full well that it won't make much difference. You wipe the saw blade clean, though the steel is stained permanently now. You think about the young doctors around you, some of them fresh out of school, their eyes wide with fear. Of the 11,000 doctors in the North, only 500 had performed surgery before this war began. In the South, the numbers are worse. Just 27 out of 3,000 had surgical experience. You do your best to teach them, to show them how to cut cleanly, how to tie off arteries, how to close wounds quickly but carefully. Sometimes you wonder if they're learning, or if they're just mimicking your motions out of desperation. There are rumors that some surgeons drink whiskey while they operate, and you know those rumors are true. You've seen it yourself. The bottles are everywhere, meant for the patients, but sometimes used by the doctors to steady their nerves. You can't blame them entirely. The work is relentless, the weight of life and death pressing down on your shoulders with every cut, every stitch, every whispered promise of survival. You try not to judge. You just keep going. In the quieter moments between surgeries, you think about the general hospitals in the big cities, places like Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Richmond. Those hospitals have kitchens, laundries, linen rooms, and chapels. They have proper beds, windows for ventilation, and sometimes even music in the halls. Here in the field, you have none of that. Just a tent, a pile of tools, and an endless stream of wounded men. But you tell yourself that this place matters too. Without field hospitals, the front lines would be even more unbearable. You are the thin barrier between life and death for so many soldiers, and even when you fail, you are still trying. The candle beside you flickers again, casting long shadows that dance on the walls. You take a moment to breathe, to stretch your back, to let your shoulders relax for just a second before the next case. The pile of limbs outside the tent continues to grow, but you don't look at it anymore. You focus on the man in front of you, the one who still has a chance, however small, to survive. You whisper to him softly, telling him he's not alone, that you're right here. Your voice is steady, calm, a gentle current in the chaos. You clean the wound, tie the tourniquet, and prepare the saw. And as the night deepens, as the lanterns burn lower, you continue your work, one patient at a time, one breath at a time, never rushing, never stopping. Always holding the line between sleep and memory, between history and forgetting, between the past and the soft silence of now. The night in the field hospital stretches on, quiet but restless, like the surface of a pond disturbed by unseen ripples. Beneath, the lanterns still burn, casting soft pools of golden light onto the worn wooden tables and blood-specked floors. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, the sweat mixing with the powdery residue of chalk and dust from the dust. Earth outside. The world beyond the tent is silent for now. The cannon fire paused, the shouting soldiers asleep or tending their wounds under the dim glow of campfires. But inside, your work continues. There's a rhythm to it, slow, repetitive cycle of cleaning, cutting, sewing, whispering, and waiting. The tools are laid out before you, each one with a purpose. The bone saw with its curved teeth dulled slightly from overuse, the forceps for extracting bullets or splinters of shattered bone, the surgical needles threaded with black silk. You know these objects better than your reflection. They are extensions of your hands now, as familiar as breathing. You glance at the next patient, a young man no older than 18, his uniform stained dark with blood, his eyes half closed, but still watching you. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. You've seen this look before, the quiet acceptance, the soft surrender to whatever comes next. You kneel beside him, your voice barely more than a whisper, telling him you're going to take care of him, that he's safe for now, that everything will be all right. You both know that isn't entirely true, but the words matter anyway. Words are sometimes all you have left when medicine runs out. His wound is in the leg, torn apart by shrapnel. The skin is ragged, the bone exposed like white chalk beneath. Layers of muscle. You touch the injury softly, feeling for signs of circulation. There's none. You know what you have to do. Amputation again. The word rolls through your mind like a slow echo in a cavern. You prepare the chloroform, gently pressing the cloth to his face. His breath slows, his eyelids flutter, and finally he sleeps. You check his pulse once more, and begin. The saw hums softly as it moves back and forth, not loudly, not sharply, just a steady rhythm that fills the tent like the quiet ticking of a clock. Back and forth, until the leg comes free. You hand it to the assistant, who wraps it in cloth and places it with the others outside. The pile is taller now, but you don't look. You've learned to keep your eyes forward, focused, only on the patient in front of you. You close the stump carefully, tying off arteries with silk thread, stitching skin with hands that no longer shake. The first time you did this, months ago, your fingers trembled so badly that you could barely hold the needle. Now, your movements are smooth, practiced, almost gentle. You wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you don't dwell on it. There's no time for such questions here. The patient will survive the night, you think. But whether he survives the infection that may come is another story. Gangrene is always a threat. The smell of it lingers in the corners of the tent, sweet and sickly, like something rotten left too long in the sun. You've seen it before, the blackened flesh, the oozing sores, the way a man's body seems to dissolve before your eyes. Sometimes maggots are the only hope, eating away the dead tissue so that the living parts can remain. You've grown used to the sight of them, wriggling in open wounds, doing the work that your tools cannot. It's strange, you think, that in a world filled with doctors and medicine, it's the lowly maggot that often saves the day. You step back from the table for a moment, wiping your hands on a cloth that's already soaked through. You glance at the other beds, each one filled with a soldier in various stages of suffering. Some have fevers, their faces flushed and shiny with sweat. Others shiver under thin blankets, their teeth chattering even though the night air is warm. Diarrhea, dysentery, scurvy, camp itch. These are the enemies you cannot fight with a saw or a scalpel. You treat what you can. For diarrhea, you give opium plugs, hoping to stop the flow. For constipation, you reach for blue mass, that mercury-laced compound that works as a laxative but slowly poisons the body over time. There are no good options, only the best bad ones. For malaria, you administer quinine when it's available, though often you have to settle for turpentine. For scurvy, you pray for green vegetables, but those are rare in camp. When you do get them, you feed them to the men carefully, spoonful by spoonful, hoping to restore some strength to their weakened bodies. The camp itch spreads like wildfire, a mysterious skin condition that no one fully understands. You treat it with poke root or sulfur ointments, but sometimes you have no choice but to scrape the skin raw, trying to rid the body of whatever is causing the rash. The men beg for relief, scratching themselves until they bleed. You do what you can, but you know it isn't enough. Outside the tent, the night deepens. The moon is high now, casting pale light onto the muddy ground where the pile of limbs waits to be buried. The soldiers assigned to that task will come in the morning, digging pits and covering the severed arms and legs with earth. No ceremony, no prayers, just a practical necessity in a world where death is routine. You glance at the faces of the doctors around you, their eyes red from lack of sleep, their hands stained like yours. Some of them are barely older than the patients they treat. Others have gray in their hair, their shoulders stooped from years of work. You wonder how many will still be here when the war is over. Will they go back to normal life? Will they sleep through the night without hearing the soft scrape of saw teeth against bone in their dreams? You doubt it. You certainly won't. The memories will stay with you, as sharp and persistent as the phantom pains felt by the amputees you treat. You check your tools again, making sure they're ready for the next case. The bucket of bloody water is emptied and refilled, though the new water isn't much cleaner than the old. You wipe the blade of the saw, not because it will prevent infection, but because it's part of the ritual. The motions keep you sane, keep you grounded. You hear a soft murmur from the next bed, a soldier calling out for someone, perhaps his mother, perhaps a friend long since gone. You move toward him, your voice low and steady, telling him you're here, that he's safe, that he's going to be all right. You know it may not be true, but in this moment, the truth is less important than comfort. You sit beside him for a while, holding his hand, feeling the warmth of life still present in his skin. The war outside may rage on, but in this tent, there's only this quiet moment, this fragile connection between two human beings in the dark. You think of the general hospitals again, the ones far from the front lines, with their clean sheets and orderly rows of beds. But here, in the field, you are part of something different, something raw and immediate. You are not just a doctor, or a nurse, or an assistant. You are a witness to history, a caretaker of stories that will never be told, a guardian of life in a place surrounded by death. The lantern flickers once more, and you prepare for the next surgery. Your hands steady, your heart quiet. You breathe in, you breathe out, and you continue, one patient at a time, one breath at a time, never rushing, never stopping, always holding the line between wakefulness and sleep, between history and forgetting, between the soft silence of now and the echoes of a war that never really ends. The hours blend in the soft hum of lantern light, and you no longer know if it is night or early morning. Inside the Civil War Field Hospital, time has a different texture, stretched and softened by exhaustion and repetition. Your hands move, without hesitation now, cleaning wounds, tying tourniquets, whispering reassurances in the dim silence. Outside, the sky might be changing color, but in here, beneath the canvas tent roof, the world remains suspended, hovering gently between life and death, between hope and resignation. You glance at your tools again, the same instruments you've used all night. The saw with its dull blade, the surgical scissors with a slight bend at the tip, the needle threaded with black silk. You think of them not as cold metal, but as companions. In this strange journey through history, objects that have become part of your hands, part of your breath. You don't need to look down to know where they are. Your fingers find them automatically, guided by muscle memory more than thought. The next patient arrives, carried in on a stretcher made from 2 long sticks and an old army blanket. His eyes are closed, but you can see his chest rising and falling, shallow but steady. A bullet has torn through his arm, shattering the bone near the shoulder. You know immediately what needs to be done. You won't try to save the arm. It's too damaged. Instead, you'll remove it cleanly, carefully, giving him a chance at survival, however slim. The thought rolls through your mind like a soft echo, not sharp or frightening, but familiar, like a well-worn path you've walked too many times. You prepare the chloroform, holding the cloth over his face as you whisper. You tell him he's going to sleep now, that he'll wake up, and it will all be over. You don't tell him that he'll wake up missing a part of himself. He probably knows already. Most of them do. His breathing slows, his eyelids flutter, and you begin. The saw hums softly, back and forth, its rhythm as steady as a lullaby. You work quickly but gently, cutting through muscle, then bone. Your hands steady even as your heart feels heavy. The arm comes free, and you hand it to the assistant without looking at it. It's just another part of the routine now. Outside, the pile of limbs grows taller, but you don't think about that. You focus on the stump, cleaning it carefully, tying off the arteries, sewing the skin closed with smooth, practiced stitches. You whisper a soft prayer, not for yourself, but for the man on the table. You hope he will heal. You hope he will find peace. But you know the risks. Infection is everywhere. Hospital gangrene, the doctors call it. A flesh-eating disease that turns wounds black and fills the air with a sickly sweet smell. You've seen it too many times. Sometimes you use maggots to clean the wounds, letting them eat away the dead tissue. It's not something you like to do, but it works better than anything else you have. The maggots know what they're doing, even if you don't. You wipe your hands again, though they're never truly clean. You rinse the tools in a bucket of water, but the water is pink with blood, and you know it won't stop the spread of disease. You've stopped believing in sterilization because you don't even know the word yet. Germs are a mystery, something no one talks about at this time. You simply do your best, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. You move to the next bed, where a soldier lies quietly, his face pale, his eyes staring at the ceiling. His stomach wound is beyond help. You know this without even touching it. The bullet tore through too much. There's nothing you can do except offer comfort. You sit beside him, holding his hand, whispering. You talk about home, about the fields in spring, about the sound of rain on a tin roof. You tell him stories, not because he asks for them, but because. You can see in his eyes that he's already halfway gone. Your voice is the last thing he'll hear, and you make sure it's gentle. Around you, the hospital breathes softly, the canvas walls moving slightly in the warm breeze. The air smells of sweat and whiskey, of iron and earth, of life and death, mingling together in a quiet dance. You're used to it now. The other doctors move quietly, their faces pale and lined with fatigue. You can see the same weariness in their eyes, the same haunted look that you feel in your chest. No one speaks unless they have to. Words are saved for the patients, for the soft murmur of comfort, not for each other. You've all become ghosts in this place, moving silently through the shadows, stitching bodies back together in the faint. Hope that some of them will survive. You think of the medicines you've used tonight: opium for pain, blue mass for constipation, quinine for malaria, mustard plasters for pneumonia. Some of them work. Some of them don't. You administer them. Anyway, because it's all you have. You remember the women who smuggle medicines into the South, hiding them in their petticoats, slipping past Union blockades with tiny bottles sewn into their skirts. You think of them as part of this hospital too, unseen but essential, their quiet bravery woven into every dose you give. You think of the young soldiers who arrive with fevers, their bodies shaking, their skin clammy. You place cool claws on their foreheads, whispering, telling them to rest. You think of the ones who never leave their beds, who fade away quietly. In the night, their breath slowing until they stop altogether. You close their eyes gently, folding their hands across their chests, whispering a final goodbye. You do this so often now that it feels like part of your daily routine. It doesn't get easier, but it gets quieter. The sounds of the hospital are soft. Now the rustle of blankets, the faint clink of metal against metal, the gentle murmur of voices. There's no shouting, no panic, just the steady rhythm of life continuing in the face of death. You think about the general hospitals again, the ones in the cities, with their clean linens and orderly rows of beds. You wonder what it would be like to work there, to have fresh bandages, real kitchens, laundries, and storerooms filled with supplies. But you're here, in the field, where supplies are scarce and every decision is a gamble. You've learned to make do with what you have. You've learned to improvise, to adapt, to survive. You glance at the sky through a small gap in the tent flap. The first hint of dawn is appearing on the horizon, a pale strip of light against the dark. You feel the night fading, replaced by the soft promise of morning. But you know the work isn't over. There will be more wounded today, more surgeries, more whispered prayers. You stretch your back, roll your shoulders, and prepare for the next patient. Your hands are steady, your heart is quiet, and you continue, one breath at a time, one stitch at a time, holding the line between sleep and wakefulness, between history and memory, between the fading shadows of the night and the soft, uncertain light of day. That the first soft gray of morning begins to seep through the seams of the canvas. A pale light that does not disturb the rhythm of the hospital, but gently folds into it, like one more layer of fabric over a tired body. You are still here, still moving softly from bed to bed, still performing the same careful tasks that have now become second nature. The men around you are stirring in their makeshift cots, some groaning quietly as consciousness returns, others staring silently into the corners of the tent where the light does not yet reach. You understand their silence? The night has been long, but for them, it was not a restful sleep. Dreams in this place are rarely gentle. They're stitched together from the sounds of saws and the wet slap of cloth in water buckets from the murmurs of the wounded and the soft shuffling of feet on blood-slick floors. Some of the men carry their wounds in their bodies, others in their minds. You tend to both, knowing that neither kind of injury is easily healed. As the morning unfolds, you check the patients one by one. There's a man with a bandaged stump. Where his arm used to be, the silk thread you stitched into his skin now glinting faintly in the early light. He's breathing evenly, his forehead cool to the touch. You whisper a quiet reassurance and move on. Another soldier lies nearby, his chest rising and falling too quickly, sweat beading on his brow. His fever hasn't broken yet. You wet a cloth and lay it across his skin, smoothing it softly. Your movements slow and steady, like a mother calming a restless child. There's no medicine for this fever, that you haven't already tried. No quinine left, no new remedies to offer. So you do what you can. You stay beside him, breathing with him, keeping him from slipping too far away. You think again about how little you have to work with in this place. The supplies are always running low. Bandages are washed and reused until they fall apart in your hands. Medicines are smuggled in hidden pockets, brought across enemy lines, by women who risk their lives to keep the soldiers alive. You admire them, though you never meet them. Their work is part of yours, an invisible thread weaving through the fabric of every patient you treat. You adjust a lantern, even though the sun is beginning to rise. The tent still needs its soft, golden glow to balance the shadows. The air is warm already, heavy with the scent of sweat and whiskey, of earth and old wood, of blood and iodine, and something else, something quieter, like the faint smell of damp linen left too long in the dark. It's the smell of waiting, of lives paused between one moment and the next. The assistant brings you a cup of coffee, thin and bitter, but you drink it gratefully. Your hands are steady, but your mind is fraying at the edges. Sleep feels like a distant memory, something that belongs to a different version of yourself. You sip the coffee slowly, letting the warmth fill your chest, not for energy, but for ritual. The small repeated acts, coffee, wiping the saw blade, adjusting the lantern, are what keep you tethered to the present. You glance toward the pile of limbs outside, now partially hidden by a tarp. The burial detail will come soon to carry them away. You don't think about it too much. You focus instead on the next patient being brought in, his face pale, his lips slightly blue. The stretcher bearers set him down gently, and you crouch beside him, checking his wound. It's in the abdomen, a bad sign. You know from experience that stomach wounds are nearly always fatal at this time. There's no way to repair the damage inside, no way to stop the slow, silent infection that spreads beneath the skin. You won't operate. There's no point. Instead, you offer comfort. You hold his hand, you whisper to him, telling him he's not alone. You give him laudanum to ease the pain, smoothing his hair back from his forehead as he drifts into a soft, medicated sleep. You sit with him for a while, longer than you need to, because you know he won't be here when the sun sets again. These moments matter. They are part of the work, too. You think about how the surgeons have become known as sawbones, a nickname. That started as a joke, but has now settled into everyday speech. Even the patients call you that sometimes, smiling weakly as they say it. There's no malice in their tone, just a shared understanding of the strange world you all inhabit together. The sawbones is not just the one who cuts. He is the one who stands between life and death, the keeper of strange, quiet rituals performed in tents and barns and church basements across the war-torn country. The tools you use are simple, but heavy with meaning. The tourniquet, the scalpel, the saw, the silk thread, they are symbols of a kind of medicine that does not yet understand germs, but understands suffering. You think of the patients who survive. Some will return home missing arms or legs, learning to live with phantom limbs that itch and ache in places that no longer exist. Others will stay in hospitals for months, healing slowly, their bodies rebuilding from the inside out. And some will not survive, their names added to lists sent back to families far away. You wonder if anyone will remember the ones who died here, in this tent, without ceremony or last words. You think about writing their names down, but you know there's no time. Another patient is being brought in, another wound to examine, another decision to make. The work does not pause, not even for memory. You clean your hands again, though you know the gesture is mostly symbolic. There's no true cleanliness here. The water is cloudy, the cloth is stained, but you do it anyway, because it feels like control in a place where control is rare. You check your tools once more, arranging them neatly on the table. The bone saw, the needle, the thread, the forceps, they sit quietly in the pale morning light, waiting for your hands. You feel the familiar ache in your shoulders, the tightness in your lower back, but you don't stop. You can't stop. The next soldier needs you. His face is young, his eyes wide with fear. You crouch beside him, your voice soft and steady, telling him what you're going to do, how you're going to help. You don't lie, but you don't tell the whole truth either. There's no point in frightening him more than he already is. You prepare the chloroform, holding the cloth gently over his nose and mouth, whispering to him as his eyelids flutter closed. When he sleeps, you begin again. The saw hums in your hand, moving back and forth with a rhythm that has become part of you now, as natural as breathing. You think about the surgeons who can remove a limb in under 10 minutes, their best times whispered like ghost stories in the quiet hours. You work carefully, not racing, not rushing, but moving steadily, knowing that speed is not the goal, precision is. You remove the limb, you hand it off, you close the wound. A soldier will wake up later, lighter by a leg, his body changed forever. You move on to the next case, and the next, your hands steady, your mind calm. The sun is rising fully now, casting soft gold across the tent walls. Outside, the birds are beginning to sing, their voices delicate and bright, as if unaware of the piles of limbs, the fevered patients, the whispered prayers inside. You listen to their song for a moment, letting it fill the spaces in your heart that the work has hollowed out. You breathe deeply, softly, and you continue, one breath at a time, one stitch at a time, never rushing, never stopping, always holding the line between history and sleep, between memory and forgetting, between the gentle morning light and the fading echoes of the night. The day has begun, but inside the field hospital, the air feels much the same as it did in the night still, heavy, warm with the breath of dozens of resting men, and a quiet rustle of cloth as nurses and assistants move carefully between the beds. You have not left your post since the night before, and your body is beginning to feel the weight of the hours. But your mind has slipped into a soft rhythm, where thoughts move slowly and hands act on their own. There's comfort in repetition, even when the task is grim. Outside, the world stirs with the distant sounds of camp, the clatter of cooking pots, the low murmur of soldiers gathering for morning rations. But here, inside this canvas-walled place, time stretches out in long, quiet lines. You move from one patient to the next, checking bandages, feeling for pulses, listening to the soft whispers of men caught between sleep and waking. Some speak to loved ones who are not there, calling out names in voices so faint they seem like wind brushing through grass. Others lie still, eyes half closed, lost in fevered dreams or the simple stillness of exhaustion. You adjust a bandage on one man's leg, noticing the way the cloth has begun to stick to the wound. You loosen it carefully, pouring a little water over the fabric to ease it away from the skin without tearing. There's no pain medicine left for him this morning, but you move slowly, whispering softly as you work, offering comfort with your tone, if not your tools. In another corner of the tent, a surgeon is performing another amputation. His saw moves with practiced ease, the sound of bone being cut blending into the background hum of the hospital. You don't look up. You've seen it too many times. The pile of limbs outside grows again, each new addition wrapped quickly and carried out under the tarp, waiting for burial. The assistants will dig the pit later, covering the arms and legs with earth, marking the spot only in memory. No one speaks of it openly, but everyone knows where the piles are buried. Some of the men joke quietly about finding their own arms someday if they ever return to the spot, but the laughter is thin, stretched too tightly over nerves that are already frayed. You take a moment to breathe, feeling the air move softly in and out of your lungs. The scent of blood and sweat is still there, but your mind no longer registers it as unpleasant. It has become part of the background, like the hum of insects or the distant roll of thunder. You think of the men who won't make it through the day, not because of the severity of their wounds, but because of the infections that are already beginning to take hold. You know the signs well now: the faint discoloration around the edges of a wound, the sudden rise in fever, the way a man's breathing changes just before the infection spreads to his blood. You do what you can to fight it, but there are no antibiotics. In this world, no antiseptics that work as they should. You use whiskey when you have it, vinegar when you don't, but mostly you rely on cloth and whispered prayers. Sometimes maggots save a life where medicine cannot. You've learned to accept that. You think of the medical schools that trained some of these surgeons, how quickly the students graduated, and now many of them had never seen a real surgery before arriving here. They are learning now, not from books, but from the endless parade of wounded men who arrive each day. Mistakes are made, but there is no time for lectures or corrections. Only more practice, more saws, more stitching. Some of the younger doctors still drink whiskey to steady their hands. You don't judge them. You understand too well the need to soften the edges of this work, to blur the sharpness of death just enough to keep going. You sip another cup of coffee, cold now but still welcome, letting the bitter taste wake you just enough to continue. There is no sleep for you today. The line of wounded outside the tent has not ended. You wipe your hands again, though the cloth is already stained, and move to the next soldier. His leg is swollen, the skin shiny and stretched tight. You know without cutting that the bone is shattered. A mini ball again, those conical bullets that break bones so completely that amputation is the only option. You prepare the chloroform, holding the cloth gently over his mouth and nose, whispering softly as his eyelids close. You check his pulse, then begin. The saw moves back and forth, the rhythm familiar now, almost soothing in its predictability. You focus on the sound, letting it quiet your mind, letting it replace the thoughts that might otherwise overwhelm you. When the leg is free, you hand it off without looking, already focused on the stump, cleaning the wound, tying off the arteries, stitching the skin. You hope he will live. You hope the infection will not come. But you know the odds, and you accept them quietly, without resistance. Outside, the sun is higher now, the air growing warmer. The smell of the hospital shifts slightly as the heat rises, the scent of putrefying flesh mixing with the sweet, sickly smell of gangrene. You breathe through your mouth, but you don't flinch. This is just another part of the day. You think of the men who were not brought here, the ones who died on the battlefield, never reaching the hospital at all. You wonder if their fate was easier in some ways. The ones who survive sometimes carry their pain for years, waking in the middle of the night with the memory of a saw's teeth on their bones, or the phantom ache of a limb that no longer exists. You wonder how many of them will find peace when the war is over, or if the war will follow them home, hidden inside their bodies like a wound that never closes. You adjust another bandage, your hands moving slowly, carefully as you whisper soft words of comfort to the man beneath your care. You tell him he's strong, that he will heal, that he will see his family again. You don't know if it's true, but the words are part of the medicine now. They help for both of you. You think of the women back home, sewing bandages, smuggling medicine, writing letters that may never reach their destination. You wonder if they know what happens here in the field hospitals, if they imagine clean beds and gentle hands, or if they understand the reality, the blood, the sweat, the long nights with no end. You hope they imagine something kinder. You hope they never have to know the truth. You look around the tent at the men resting, the surgeons working, the assistants carrying bowls of water and stacks of cloth. Everyone moves quietly, their footsteps soft, their voices low. This is not a place of panic, but of steady, relentless care. You think of it as a kind of prayer, the way you all keep going, one patient at a time, one breath at a time. The pile of limbs outside is larger now, but you don't look. You focus on the man in front of you, his life still hanging in the balance. You clean the wound. You tie the bandage. You whisper to him as his eyes close. You move to the next soldier, and the next, and the next, your hands steady, your heart quiet. The work continues, soft and slow, like the turning of the earth beneath your feet, like the gentle pull of sleep on a weary mind, like the fading of night into day, again and again, without end. The sun continues its slow climb in the sky, though. Inside the field hospital, the day's progress is marked not by clocks or shadows, but by the steady rhythm of hands working, of soft murmurs exchanged between caregivers, of the gentle movements of bodies from one bed to another. The morning has fully arrived, but you feel no difference between night and day now. Time here has folded into itself, becoming something soft and circular, like the turning of a wheel that never stops. The wounded keep coming, and you keep tending to them, your hands moving with a practiced calm that comes not from peace, but from routine. The young soldier in front of you has been burned by black powder. His face is blistered, his hands curled into claw-like shapes from the heat. You sit beside him quietly, your voice low, telling him that you're going to clean the wounds, that you'll be gentle, that you'll take care of him. He nods faintly, his lips barely moving. You dip a cloth into cool water, wiping the burns, carefully, removing the ash and soot without peeling away the skin. There's no pain medicine left for burns today, but you work slowly, whispering softly, offering kindness in place of morphine. You think about how little you have to offer sometimes, but you do it anyway, because there's nothing else to do. You look at the other bedsmen with missing limbs, men feverish from infection, men too weak to speak. Some are awake, staring at the canvas roof of the tent, their eyes glassy with exhaustion. Others have drifted into uneasy sleep, their bodies twitching as dreams and memories mix together in the fog of fever. You adjust their blankets, check their pulses, listen to the soft, wet sounds of their breathing. You've learned to hear the difference between the rattling breath of pneumonia and the shallow gasps of shock. Both are common here. Both are familiar. You move to the next patient, a man with a deep wound in his thigh. The bullet is still inside. You wash your hands again, though the water is cloudy now, stained from the last dozen patients. You don't think about it. You probe the wound gently with your fingers, feeling for the metal, for the fragments of bone that sometimes hide inside torn muscle. Your hands are careful, your touch soft. You find the bullet, extract it slowly, drop it into a bowl with the quiet clink. The man moans softly, but you soothe him with your voice, telling him it's almost over, that he's safe now. You close the wound, stitch the skin with black silk, and move on. The pile of bullets in the bowl grows, each one a small monument to the violence of the day. You wonder sometimes how many bullets you've removed since this war began. Hundreds? Thousands? You don't keep count. You simply keep going. Outside, the burial detail has arrived. You hear the soft scrape of shovels against earth as they begin to dig the pits for the limbs. There's no ceremony, no prayers, just the practical work of making space for more. The piles have to be cleared before they attract flies and dogs. You try not to think about it, focusing instead on the work in front of you. Another patient arrives, carried in by stretcher bearers whose faces are pale from fatigue. The man on the stretcher is whispering to himself, his words too soft to understand. You lean close, listening. Sometimes the wounded speak to ghosts. Sometimes they say nothing at all. His wound is in the chest, a bad sign. You know from experience that there's little you can do for him. You clean the wound anyway, wrapping it gently. giving him laudanum for the pain. You sit beside him for a while, holding his hand as he drifts into sleep. You think about how much of this work is not about saving lives, but about bearing witness, about keeping men company as they slip away. It's a strange kind of medicine, but it matters. You move on to the next bed, and the next, checking for fever, for infection, for signs of improvement or decline. You listen to the soft rustling of the tent walls in the breeze, the distant sounds of soldiers drilling outside, the faint clink of metal tools in the surgeon's hands. The world beyond the hospital continues, but here, inside this canvas sanctuary, time remains still. You think of the stories you've heard from other hospitals, the ones in the cities. They have more supplies there, more doctors, more clean linens. But even there, the death toll is high. Disease claims more soldiers than bullets. Measles, smallpox, malaria, dysentery, these are the real killers. You treat them as best you can, with what little you have. For malaria, you give quinine when it's available, though often it's not. For diarrhea, you administer opium plugs, hoping to slow the flow. For constipation, you give blue mass, knowing full well that the mercury in it will poison the body. Slowly, but it's all you have. You think of the camp itch again, that mysterious skin disease no one understands. Some say it's caused by mites, others by poor hygiene. You treat it with poke root or by scrubbing the skin raw. The men scratch themselves until they bleed, begging for relief. You do what you can, but the itching always returns. You glance at the surgeons around you, their faces pale, their eyes ringed with exhaustion. Some of them are barely out of medical school. Others are older, their hands steady, but their hearts heavy. You all share the same quiet burden, the knowledge that you are working with tools and medicines that belong to a world that does not yet understand what truly causes disease. Germ theory is still years away. You don't know about bacteria, about sterilization, about the invisible threats that hover around every patient. You do your best anyway. You clean your hands, you wipe your tools, you move carefully from one bed to the next, hoping that care will be enough. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. You think of the letters you've written for patients who cannot hold a pen, messages sent home to mothers and wives and children. Sometimes you write the words they cannot say. Sometimes you make the letters sound brighter than the truth, offering hope even when you know the chances are slim. You think of the families waiting for news, imagining their loved ones in clean hospitals with gentle nurses, not intense like this, with piles of limbs outside and flies buzzing quietly in the corners. You hope they never have to know the full truth. The sun is higher now, casting long beams of light through the cracks in the tent walls. You wipe your forehead, your hands sticky with sweat. You don't stop. Don't stop. Another patient is waiting. Another wound to clean. Another body to stitch. You move forward softly, your heart steady, your breath calm. You continue, one patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one quiet moment after another, never rushing, never stopping, always holding the line between history and forgetting, between the soft echoes of life and the gentle silence of sleep. The sun has risen fully now, casting a soft, golden hue over the canvas walls of the field hospital. But inside, the rhythm of the work remains unchanged, slow, steady, and strangely gentle, despite the harshness of what you're doing. You move carefully between the rows of patients, your footsteps silent, your hands practiced. The tent breathes around you, the fabric moving slightly with each breeze that passes through the camp outside. You think of the world beyond this hospital, soldiers lining up for morning drill, officers reading letters from home, cooks stirring pots of thin stew. But here, in this small patch of earth beneath the canvas, the world has shrunk to the size of a few wooden tables, some stained mattresses, and the soft murmur of wounded men. You glance at the pile of tools beside you, each one familiar by now. The bone saw is nicked along the edge from use, its handle smooth from the sweat of countless hands. The forceps glint dully in the morning light, their tips bent slightly, from prying bullets out of bone. The needle and thread rest on a small cloth, the black silk gleaming faintly like spiderwebs caught in dew. These are your companions in this strange, quiet life you've built inside the war. You wipe your hands again, though the cloth is more symbolic than effective at this point, and move to the next patient. He's young, like so many of them, his face pale and thin beneath the grime of battle. His arm is swollen, the skin stretched tight, purple and red where infection has set in. You know the smell before you even lean close, the sour-sweet scent of gangrene, unmistakable and unavoidable. You prepare for the surgery, knowing it must be done quickly but carefully. Amputation is the only way to save him now, though you... No, it's not really saving, it's just buying time. Maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. But sometimes, a few months is everything. You hold the chloroform cloth over his face, whispering softly as his eyes close. His breathing slows, his hands relax, and you begin. The saw hums softly in your hand, the rhythm steady, the sound no longer jarring, but almost musical in its consistency. Back and forth, until the bone gives way. You wrap the stump in clean cloth, tie off the arteries, and sew the skin closed with smooth, even stitches. You whisper a soft prayer, not because you believe it will change the outcome, but because it helps you stay grounded. You move to the next bed. Another fever. Another soldier shivering under a thin blanket, his teeth chattering, his eyes glassy. You check his pulse, lay a cool cloth on his forehead, and give him a small dose of laudanum to ease his pain. There's nothing else you can do. You think of the diseases you've seen, spread through the camps: measles, smallpox, dysentery, malaria. You treat them as best you can, but medicine is limited, both in supply and in knowledge. You don't know about germs yet, about how disease spreads invisibly from one patient to the next. You do your best anyway, cleaning hands, washing cloths, keeping the tent as orderly as possible. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it doesn't. You think of the soldiers who survive their wounds only to die from infection days later. The term hospital gangrene has become part of your daily vocabulary, now a necrotizing condition that eats away at healthy flesh, turning pink wounds into black pits of rot. You've tried every remedy, you know, vinegar, whiskey, poke, root, even maggots. Sometimes the maggots work, eating away the dead tissue and leaving the healthy parts behind. It's strange to think of them as allies, but in this place, you take help where you can find it. You remember the first time you saw a pile of severed limbs outside the tent. It shocked you then the way the arms and legs stacked up, wrapped, loosely in cloth, waiting for burial. Now you barely notice. The burial detail will come again today, digging pits behind the hospital, covering the limbs with earth, saying no prayers, marking no graves. You wonder if future generations will find them someday, digging into the ground and discovering bones where they least expect them. You hope they'll understand what happened here. You hope they'll remember. Another patient is carried in a man shot in the chest, his breathing shallow, his lips tinged blue. You know you cannot save him. There's nothing to be done for. A wound like this, not with the tools and knowledge you have. You give him laudanum for the pain, sit beside him quietly, and hold his hand. You listen to his breath slow, his body relax, his eyes close. You think about how much of your work is this, sitting with the dying, bearing witness, keeping them company as they slip away. It is not always about healing. Sometimes it's just about being present. You adjust his blanket, smooth his hair, whisper a soft goodbye. You move to the next bed. Another wound. Another life hanging in the balance. Your hands move automatically now, your mind calm, your breath steady. You clean the wound, remove the bullet, and sew the skin closed. You check for signs of infection, knowing it may come anyway. You think of the families waiting at home, imagining their sons and brothers in clean hospital beds, cared for by gentle nurses. You wish you could give them that picture, but this is the reality. Tense, blood, sawdust, sweat, and the quiet murmur of men who may or may not see another sunrise. You wonder how many of these stories will be remembered. How many of these names will be written down? You think of your own name, fading into the background, becoming part of the fabric of this war. You don't mind. You didn't come here to be remembered. You came here to do the work. You glance at the other doctors, their faces pale, their eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Some are still students, learning as they go, their hands trembling, as they make their first cuts. Others are veterans now, their hands steady, but their hearts heavy. You all share the same burden, the endless work of patching together bodies in a world that tears them apart, faster than you can mend them. You think of the women who sew bandages back home, who write letters, who smuggle medicines in their petticoats. You think of the soldiers who bring their friends to you, carrying them on stretchers made from blankets and sticks, whispering soft words as they lay them down. You think of the patients who survive, who will carry these scars for the rest of their lives, waking in the middle of the night with phantom pains in limbs they no longer have. The sun continues to rise, casting long shadows across the tent floor. You wipe your hands again, adjust your tools, and move to the next patient. You are tired, but you do not stop. This is the work. This is the rhythm of the day. One patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. You continue steady and soft, holding the line between life and death, between history and sleep, between memory and silence. The hours pass, though you no longer keep track of them in numbers or on clocks. Here in the field hospital, time is measured differently, by the number of bandages changed, by the sound of a saw moving back and forth across bone, by the soft sigh of a patient drifting into sleep, or the quiet final breath of a man whose pulse has faded. The tent feels warm now, the midday sun pressing against the canvas walls, but inside, the work remains steady, unchanged. Your hands move carefully, gently, as you wipe away sweat from a soldier's forehead, adjust the cloth beneath his head, and check the stitches on his leg. The wound looks clean for now, though you know how quickly that can change. One moment, a wound is pink and healthy. The next, it darkens at the edges, infection creeping silently beneath the skin. You have learned to spot the signs, the heat rising from the body, the subtle change in smell, the way the patient's eyes lose their focus. You do what you can to stop it, but sometimes the infection wins, no matter how carefully you tend to the wounds. You think about the things you've learned since this war began, skills you never thought you'd master. How to saw through bone in under 10 minutes. How to probe a bullet wound with your fingers and feel for metal without hesitation. How to tie off arteries quickly so the patient doesn't bleed out on the table. These are not lessons you wanted, but they are yours now, woven into your muscles, etched into your memory. You wonder if you will ever forget the feeling of a rib cracking beneath your hand, or the sound of silk thread pulling through skin. You doubt it. You think of the soldiers who have passed through this tent, some healed, some lost, all changed forever. Their faces blur together in your mind, a long line of pale skin, hollow eyes, whispered prayers. Some held letters from home in their hands as they died. Others clutched at nothing, their fingers curling into the air, as if reaching for something just out of sight. You remember them all, even if you don't know their names. You move to the next patient, a man with a wound in his side. The bullet has lodged near his ribs. too deep to reach without risking more damage. You clean the wound gently, washing away the dried blood, checking for signs of infection. You give him laudanum to ease his pain, whispering softly as you work. Your voice is calm, your hands steady and steady. You know there's not much more you can do for him, but you stay by his side anyway. Sometimes just being present is the best medicine you have. You think of the camp outside, the rows of tents, the muddy paths, the soldiers cooking breakfast over small fires. Life continues out there, even as death lingers here inside the hospital. You hear the faint sound of laughter from somewhere beyond the tent walls, and it feels strange, almost surreal, to imagine that joy still exists in the world. But you're glad for it. Joy, no matter how brief, is a kind of resistance against the darkness. You turn back to your work. Another patient arrives, this one unconscious from blood loss. His leg is mangled, the bone shattered beyond repair. You prepare for amputation again, the routine so familiar now that you could perform it in your sleep. You tie the tourniquet, check for circulation, and press the chloroform cloth gently over his face. His breathing slows, and you begin. The saw moves smoothly through flesh and bone, your hand steady, your mind quiet. You focus on the task, not letting your thoughts drift too far. You know how dangerous that can be. After the leg is removed, you clean the stump, sew the skin closed, and bandage the wound. You hope for the best, but you are prepared for the worst. The pile of limbs outside the tent has grown again, but you don't think about it. It's just another part of the day. The burial detail will come soon to take them away, digging another pit behind the hospital, covering the limbs with earth. No markers will be placed, no records kept. These are the forgotten pieces of the war, left behind. In silence, you wipe your hands once more, though the cloth is stained and damp. You sip a little water, your throat dry from hours of soft speaking. You don't drink too much. You've learned to ration everything here, even small comforts. You move to the next bed, where a soldier lies with his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling slowly. His fever has broken, and you allow yourself a small breath of relief. Not every case ends in loss. Some men do heal. Some wounds do close without infection. You hold on to these moments like small, bright stones in the pocket of your mind, tokens of hope in a place where hope is rare. You glance at the other doctors, their faces drawn, their eyes shadowed by lack of sleep. You know they feel the same weight you do, the burden of decisions, the endless repetition of cutting and stitching, the quiet moments of sitting beside the dying. You share this burden without speaking of it. There's no need for words. The silence between you is its own kind of language. You think of the women who sew bandages by candlelight, the families who wait for letters, the mothers who will read your words when you write home for the men who cannot. You think of the supplies smuggled through blockades, hidden in the hems, of dresses wrapped in folds of cloth. You think of the strange courage it takes to fight a war without ever picking up a weapon. You move to the next patient. His wound is simple this time, a shallow cut across the arm, clean and easy to stitch. You take your time, letting your hands rest in the familiar rhythm of sewing skin. It feels almost peaceful compared to the amputations, the chest wounds, the fevers. You sew carefully, each stitch like a small act of kindness. The soldier watches you, his eyes calm, his breath steady. You smile at him softly, and he smiles back. In this moment, there is no war, no battlefields, no piles of limbs outside the tent. There is only this, two human beings sharing a quiet space in the midst of chaos. You finish the stitches, tie the thread, and cut it carefully. You pat his arm, gently telling him he's strong, that he will heal. He nods, his eyes closing in rest. You move on, your hands steady, your heart soft. The work continues, as it always does, one patient at a time, one breath at a time, one moment after another, flowing softly like the slow turning of the earth beneath your feet. You hold the line between life and death, between history and memory, between the fading echoes of the morning and the gentle promise of sleep. The day stretches on, but you no longer measure it by hours or by the shifting angle of the sun outside the tent. Inside the field hospital, time folds in upon itself, becoming a soft loop of care and repetition, a rhythm that continues regardless of the clock. Your body moves automatically now, guided by routine more than conscious thought. Your hands, though tired, do not shake. They have learned the delicate balance between precision and softness, between efficiency and empathy. You check the patients again, moving slowly between the rows of beds. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of sweat and old whiskey, of iodine, and the faint metallic tang of blood. You've grown used to it, the way one grows used to the ticking of a clock in a quiet room. It becomes part of the background, unnoticed until it stops. You pause beside a young soldier whose eyes are open but unfocused. His lips move silently, mouthing words you cannot hear. You take his hand gently, feeling the weak pulse beneath his skin, and whisper to him, grounding him softly back into this world, reminding him with your voice that he is not alone. He does not respond, but his breathing slows, and you count that as a kind of success. You check his wound, a clean amputation at the knee, wrapped in linen bandages that have already soaked through once today. You change them carefully, layer by layer, exposing the stump to fresh air before rewrapping it with new cloth. The stitches look good, no signs of infection yet. You breathe a little easier, knowing how rare that is. Infections have become your greatest enemy in this war, more dangerous than bullets or bayonets. You've seen it too many times. A wound that should heal turns dark and swollen, the edges slick with pus, the smell unmistakable. Hospital gangrene, you call it. Some of the younger doctors still flinch at the sight of it, but you no longer do. You've learned to treat it, when you can, with maggots, with whiskey, with the careful removal of dead flesh. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you try anyway. You move on to the next patient, a soldier burned by cannon flash, his face and arms blistered and raw. You dip the cloth in cool water, pressing it gently to his skin, careful not to disturb the fragile layers of tissue trying to heal. You whisper to him softly, telling him he's safe now, that the worst is over. You don't know if that's true, but the words matter. In this place, comfort is as much a part of medicine as the tools you use. You glance at the table where your instruments are laid out. The saw, the forceps, the scalpel, the needle and thread, they are all familiar now, extensions of your hands. You think of them not as weapons of destruction, but as tools of mercy. The saw cuts, yes, but it also saves. The needle pierces, but it also closes. You have learned to hold both truths at once, without fear or hesitation. Outside the tent, the burial detail works quietly, shovels scraping against the earth as they cover the latest pile of amputated limbs. You don't watch. You've seen enough of that already. Instead, you focus on the living, the men who still breathe, who still have a chance, however small. Another patient is brought in, a soldier with a wound in his abdomen. You know before. You even touch him that he won't survive. The bullet has torn through too much. You clean the wound anyway, wrapping it gently, giving him laudanum for the pain. You sit beside him for a while, holding his hand, breathing with him, whispering to him as he drifts toward the end. You've learned that this, too, is part of the work, not just saving lives, but witnessing death with kindness. You think of the families waiting for news, of the letters you've written for men who could no longer hold a pen. You wonder if the words you chose brought any comfort. If the mothers and wives and children believed your gentle lies, that their loved ones died peacefully, without pain, thinking of home. You hope so. Sometimes you believe the lies yourself. It's easier that way. You check your supplies again. The bandages are running low. The medicines are almost gone. You ration them carefully, giving just enough to ease pain, but not so much that you'll run out before the next shipment, if it comes at all. In the South, supplies are scarcer still. Medicines are smuggled past Union blockades, hidden in the folds of women's skirts, sewn into hems, carried secretly across enemy lines. You think of those women as part of this hospital, even if you never see them. Their courage touches every patient you treat. You move to the next bed, where a soldier sleeps fitfully, his body twitching with fever. You check his pulse, his breathing, on this wound. You adjust his blankets, cooling his forehead with a damp cloth. You know he might not survive the night, but you care for him as if he will. That is your duty. That is the rhythm of this place. You think of the larger hospitals in the cities, the general hospitals with their clean linens, their kitchens, their chapels. You wonder what it would be like to work there, far from the front lines, with more supplies and more rest. But you are here, in the field, where the work is raw and immediate, where the line between life and death is thin and frayed. You have become used to this life, the endless loop of cutting and stitching, of cleaning and comforting. You don't know what you will do when the war ends, if it ends. You don't know if you will return to a normal life, or if this rhythm will stay with you forever. You suspect it will. You sip a little water, your throat dry from hours of soft speaking. You glance at the surgeons around you, their faces pale, their hands stained like yours. Some are still learning, their eyes wide, their movements tentative. Others are like you now, steady, quiet, efficient. You all share the same burden, though you rarely speak of it. The silence between you is its own kind of language. You check your tools again, wiping them carefully, even though you know it won't prevent infection. The saw, the forceps, the needle, they are clean enough for this place, for this time. You move to the next patient, your hands steady, your voice soft. You work slowly, calmly, never rushing, never stopping. The day continues. The sun arcs across the sky, but you do not notice. You are here, in this moment, in this soft rhythm of care. One patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. You hold the line between life and death, between memory and sleep, between the quiet hum of the present and the distant echoes of history that will one day tell the story in softer, quieter words. The day moves forward, though inside the field. Hospital. Time has long since lost its sharp edges. The hours no longer feel separate. They blend together like watercolors running across a damp canvas, soft and indistinct. You continue your work, a steady hum of tasks filling your mind with a kind of quiet calm. There is no hurry here, no panic, only the gentle weight of repetition. Tying of tourniquets, the probing of wounds, a careful stitching of skin. The air inside the tent is warm, thick with the mixed scents of sweat, whiskey, iodine, and the faint lingering sweetness of infection. Outside you can hear the soft murmur of soldiers in camp, their voices low as they tend to chores or sit, quietly, staring into the middle distance. The war pauses for no one, but here, in this small space beneath the canvas, there is a kind of stillness, a bubble of time set apart from the rest of the world. You adjust a lantern, even though the sun is high now. The shadows inside the tent still need softening. The light needs balancing, for the comfort of the men who lie in rows along the makeshift beds. Some sleep, their bodies limp and pale against the thin mattresses. Others whisper quietly, calling out for mothers, wives, or distant homes. You understand this need to speak softly to the air, to say names aloud even when no one is listening. It is a way of staying anchored, of keeping the mind from floating too far away. You move to the next patient, your hands steady, your voice gentle. His wound is deep but clean, a rare gift in this place. A slice across the thigh, likely from a bayonet. You clean it carefully, stitching the muscle closed layer by layer, then the skin. You speak softly as you work, telling him stories about home, about ordinary things, a river flowing past a village, the sound of rain on rooftops, the smell of bread baking in a distant kitchen. These are the things the mind holds on to when the body is broken. He listens, eyes half-lidded, breathing slowly. You finish the stitches, tie the knot, cut the thread, and cover the wound with a clean cloth. You hope he will heal. You hope the fever won't come, but you know better than to make promises. You wipe your hands, even though they're already clean enough for this place, and move to the next bed. Another soldier, this one with a shattered arm. You feel the pieces of bone beneath his skin as you press gently, searching for fragments. You know the arm cannot be saved. You prepare for amputation once more. The saw rests nearby, its blade worn but still sharp enough. You hold the chloroform cloth over his face, watching his breathing slow, his eyelids flutter. When he sleeps, you begin. The saw hums softly in your hand, the back and forth motion familiar now, almost soothing. You work quickly but gently, cutting through the muscle, the bone, the final soft layers. When the arm is free, you hand it off to an assistant who wraps it and carries it outside to the growing pile. You don't look. You focus on the stump, tying off arteries, sewing the skin closed with smooth, practiced stitches. The routine is not cold or mechanical. It is careful, deliberate, filled with the quiet hope of survival. You whisper a soft prayer under your breath, not for the sake of religion, but for the rhythm of it, for the way the words steady your hands. You move to the next patient, and the next. Some are awake, their eyes watching you, their lips forming. Quiet questions. Will I live? Will I walk again? Will I go home? You answer softly, never with lies, but always with comfort. You tell them you are doing everything you can. You tell them they are brave. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. You think of the diseases spreading through the camps, the fevers, the coughs, the strange rashes that creep across the skin. You treat them all with the same care you give to bullet wounds. Opium for pain, blue mass for constipation, quinine for malaria, mustard plasters for bronchitis. There is no cure for most of these things, but you try anyway. You listen to the men talk about home in their sleep, about sisters and fathers and friends. You write letters. For them when they cannot hold a pen, your own handwriting filling pages with words of hope and love, even when the truth is darker. You think of the women back home, sewing bandages by lantern light, smuggling medicines through enemy lines, waiting by windows for news. You wonder if they know what really happens here, or if they imagine something cleaner, something softer. You hope they never have to see the piles of limbs, the bloody cloths, the endless rows of wounded men. You think of the surgeons around you, their faces drawn, their eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Some are young, their hands still trembling as they learn. Others are older, their hands steady, but their hearts tired. You share the same burden, the same quiet understanding that this work is not about victory, but about survival, about doing what you can with what you have. You wipe your tools again, the saw, the forceps, the needle. You arrange them carefully on the table, the same way you've done every day, the same way you'll do tomorrow. There's comfort in the repetition, in the soft, steady rhythm of the work. You hear the shovels outside, the burial detail covering the latest pile of limbs with earth. No one speaks of it, but everyone knows. The men in the beds know. The surgeons know. The assistants know. It is part of this place, part of the rhythm. You check the next patient, his fever rising, his skin hot beneath your hand. You place a cool cloth on his forehead, whispering softly. You tell him he's safe now, that you're here, that you'll watch over him. You stay beside him for a while, breathing with him, matching his rhythm. Sometimes that's the best you can do. Sometimes it's enough. You think of the war outside this tent, of the battles still being fought, of the soldiers still marching. You think of the day when this will all be over, when the tents will come down, when the saws will be cleaned and put away. You wonder if that day will ever come. You hope it will, but for now, you continue. One patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. You hold the line between life and death, between memory and sleep, between the soft hum of the present and the distant echoes of history that will one day forget the names but remember the story. You continue, steady and calm, never rushing, never stopping. Your hands moving softly in the fading warmth of the day, the hours continue their gentle, unmarked passage, but here inside the tent, you remain focused only on the patient in front. Of you, the soft sounds of breathing, the subtle shift of cloth as you adjust a blanket or tie off a bandage. The war outside might be shifting, new battles forming, new lines being drawn, but inside this hospital, the rhythm is the same. One wound at a time, one whispered reassurance at a time. Your hands are stained with the evidence of the day, but you wipe them clean again, not for hygiene in the modern sense, but because the act itself feels like a ritual, a soft reset before you face the next human body in need of care. You pause for a moment beside a man whose face is thin, his eyes closed in restless sleep. He mutters softly, words blending together into a sound like wind moving through trees. You recognize the tone, if not the language, of the dream. Soldiers often speak in their sleep here, sometimes of home, sometimes of battles long past, sometimes of things no one else can understand. You place a hand on his arm, grounding him gently back into the moment, letting him know he is not alone. His fever has risen throughout the day, and you adjust the cloth on his forehead, cooling it again with water from the near-empty basin. Supplies are low, but you stretch them carefully, knowing how far a single gesture of care can carry a man in this place. You think again of the medicines you have used today, the opium that dulls pain but clouds the mind, the blue mass that moves the bowels but poisons the body over time, the quinine that fights malaria when you have it, the turpentine you use when you don't. You think of the mustard plasters placed on chests to break a fever, the poke root rubbed into skin for, the relentless camp itch that no one can explain. You've done these things so many times now that your hands move without asking for instructions, your mind gently drifting into the soft spaces between thoughts as you work. Another patient arrives, his uniform cut open at the chest to reveal a wound you know cannot be treated. You clean it anyway, because that is the rhythm you treat even the hopeless cases, not because you believe you can save them, but because no one should die untouched, uncared for, unseen. You sit with him as he struggles to breathe, your hand resting on his shoulder, your voice low and steady in his ear. You tell him about rivers and birds and the smell of bread baking, about things far from here, far from this canvas tent, far from the sawdust and the whispered prayers. His eyes soften as he listens, and when his breathing slows, you remain by his side until the end. You close his eyes gently, fold his hands across his chest, and whisper a final goodbye. You think about how often this part of the work is invisible, the sitting beside, the watching, the witnessing. There is no saw involved in this task, no needle, no thread. But it is surgery of another kind, a careful repair of the space between life and death. You move on, your breath steady, your hands soft. Outside, the burial detail is still at work. You can hear the muffled thud of shovels in the earth, covering the limbs removed today, the fragments of bodies that no longer belong to anyone. There are no gravestones for these pieces, no names attached. They vanish into the ground without ceremony, and you wonder if future generations will ever find them. Perhaps one day, long after the war, someone will dig into the earth and discover the bones of an arm, the shattered remnants of a leg, and wonder who they belong to. You hope they will remember not just the battles, but the quiet places like this, where life and death happen softly, without headlines. You check your tools again, arranging them carefully. The saw, the forceps, the needle threaded with silk. The cloth beneath them is stained, but clean enough for now. You wipe the blade of the saw, knowing it will be used again soon. There is no pause here, no stopping point. The work continues. You think of the surgeons around you, some leaning against walls for a moment's rest, others wiping sweat from their faces before beginning the next operation. You all share the same silence, the same tiredness, the same quiet understanding that this work is both necessary and impossible at once. You glance at the pile of extracted bullets in the metal basin nearby. Each one represents a wound you've probed, a body you've touched, a life you've tried to save. You think of the hands that fired those bullets, and the hands that now remove them. War makes strange loops of action and consequence, and you are caught somewhere in the middle of that loop, sewing flesh back together, even as new wounds are made elsewhere. Another patient waits. His leg is shattered, the bone splintered like dry wood. You prepare for amputation again, the routine so familiar now that it feels almost like a quiet meditation. You tie the tourniquet, press the chloroform cloth gently to his face, and watch his breathing slow. When he sleeps, you begin. The saw moves back and forth, its sound blending into the background hum of the tent. You cut carefully, your hands steady, your mind calm. When the leg is free, you hand it off without looking, already focused on the stump. You tie off the arteries, sew the skin closed, and wrap the wound in cloth. You whisper softly to the sleeping man, telling him he's safe, that he will wake up soon. You hope he does. You move to the next patient, and the next. You think of the women who wait for news, who sew bandages, who smuggle medicines in secret compartments beneath their dresses. You think of the letters you've written today, your own hand shaping the words of soldiers too weak to hold a pen. You imagine the mothers and wives who will read them, clutching the paper in kitchens far from here, imagining their sons and husbands in clean beds, tended gently. You wonder if they can picture the canvas tents, the rows of cots, the piles of limbs, the endless sawdust on the floor. You hope they never have to. You glance at the sky through the small gaps in the tent walls. The sun has shifted again, casting long golden shadows across the ground. But you do not think of time in the usual way. You think in moments instead, in breaths and stitches, in the slow rhythm of tending to the broken. You continue your work, soft and steady, your hands moving without rush, your voice gentle. One patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. You hold the line between sleep and wakefulness, between memory and silence, between the sharp edges of history and the soft shadows of now. The day continues, and so do you, quietly, endlessly, softly, without pause. The soft arc of the sun continues its silent journey across the sky. But inside the field hospital, the rhythm remains unchanged, slow, steady, and filled with the quiet repetition of care. You wipe your hands again, though the cloth is stained from hours of use, the fibers stiff from drying blood and sweat. Your muscles ache, but you no longer notice the soreness as pain. It has become part of the background, like the hum of distant cannons or the soft murmurs of men caught between waking and sleep. You move through the rows of patients, checking bandages, listening to breathing, adjusting limbs with careful hands. The air is warm now, thick with the smell of bodies, of antiseptics, of the faint sweetness of infection, mixed with whiskey and dirt. Some of the men have drifted into deeper sleep, their faces calm, their mouths slightly open as they breathe. Others lie awake, their eyes glazed but still watching, their minds hovering somewhere between memory and the present. You kneel beside a soldier whose leg was taken earlier in the day, checking the stitches at the stump. The silk thread catches the light as you inspect your work. There is no sign of infection yet, but you know how quickly that can change. Gangrene has a way of creeping silently beneath the skin, its edges blackening wounds that once looked clean. You adjust his bandage gently, your hands soft, your voice even softer, as you tell him he is doing well. His eyes flicker for a moment, the faintest sign of acknowledgement, and you count that as progress. You move on, your breath matching the rhythm of your steps, calm and steady. Another soldier waits, his wound on the upper arm, where a bullet tore through muscle but missed the bone. A good wound, you think a survivable one. You clean it slowly, removing the clotted blood with warm water, patting it dry, and threading the needle with black silk. The stitches move through the skin with ease, your hands so used to the motion now that you could do it in the dark. You speak to him softly as you work, telling him stories of rivers, of quiet mornings before the war, of the way the world smells after rain. You find that these words are as important as the stitches, a kind of medicine for the mind while the body mends. You finish the sewing, tie the knot, cut the thread, and wrap the wound in fresh linen. You press his hand gently before moving on. There is no time to rest, but you no longer think of rest as a destination. You think of the rhythm. Instead, the soft looping of task after task, the way the hours fold into each other, until you no longer know where one ends and another begins. You think of the saw again, sitting quietly on the table, waiting for the next case. The handle is warm from so much use, and the blade dulled slightly, but still sharp enough for the work. You clean it out of habit, running the cloth along the teeth, feeling the familiar weight of it in your hands. The saw is not a symbol of cruelty here. It is a tool of mercy. Removing limbs before infection can take the whole body. It is a strange kind of kindness, but kindness nonetheless. You glance at the basin nearby, where bullets collect like strange metallic seeds. Each one represents a moment of care, a wound opened, a bullet removed, a life briefly extended. You think of how many you've removed today, and then you let the thought drift away. Numbers do not matter here. Only the moment does. You check the next patient, a man whose fever has not broken. His skin is hot to the touch, his breath shallow, his eyes fluttering beneath closed lids. You place a cool cloth on his forehead, whispering softly to him. You do not know if he hears you, but you speak anyway. Words are sometimes the only tool left. You think again of the larger hospitals in the cities, where patients have clean beds and nurses have more supplies. But you also think of the loneliness of those places, the way some men die in silence, surrounded by order but not by touch. Here, in the field, there is chaos, but there is also connection. You sit beside the fevered man for a while, matching your breath to his, staying close. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes it isn't. You glance at the sky again, the light shifting to a softer gold, the shadows growing longer. The burial detail continues their work outside, covering the limbs removed today, filling the pits with earth, their shovels moving in a rhythm that matches your own quiet, methodical, necessary. No one speaks of the piles anymore. They are simply part of the landscape now, like the canvas walls of the tent or the rows of cots inside. You think of the women who send letters, who wait by windows, who sew bandages by candlelight. You think of the mothers who will receive news from this place, written in your hand when the soldiers cannot hold a pen. You try to make the letters kind, soft, filled with images of rest and bravery, never mentioning the sawdust on the floor or the piles outside the tent. Some truths are better left unsaid. You move to the next soldier, his face lined with sweat, his lips cracked from thirst. You offer him water slowly, careful not to let him drink too much at once. You clean his wound, check for signs of infection, and adjust his bandage. He thanks you with a whisper so faint you barely hear it. You smile softly, not needing more. These moments matter. These moments are why you continue. You think of the future, of the day when the war will end, when the tents will come down, when the saw will no longer be needed. You wonder what you will do then. Will your hands ever stop remembering the shape of a saw handle, the tug of a suture thread? Will you ever sleep without hearing the soft scrape of metal on bone in your dreams? You do not know. But you do know this. For now, you will continue. One patient at a time. One stitch at a time. One breath at a time. The day softens further, the light fading, but you remain steady, your hands moving in their quiet loop of care. You hold the line between life and death, between memory and forgetting, between history and the soft silence of sleep. You work softly, calmly, endlessly, the hum of the present wrapping around you like a blanket, carrying you gently into the next moment. And the next, the light outside has shifted once more, slipping into the gentle amber of late afternoon. But inside the field hospital, the work continues with the same soft, unwavering rhythm it has kept since morning. You move through the tent with familiar steps, your hands careful but not hurried, your eyes soft but focused. The wounded lie quietly. Now, some asleep, others caught in the half-world of fever dreams. Their breaths rise and fall like the tide, sometimes shallow, sometimes deep, always with that fragile uncertainty that comes when the body teeters between life and something beyond it. You've grown used to the sounds of this place, the distant rumble of carts bringing in new patients, the soft clink of tools against bowls, the low murmurs of surgeons consulting over wounds. It has become a kind of music to you, not harsh or discordant, but woven together with the threads of care and repetition. The saw still rests nearby, its blade clean for the moment, but ready. You run your fingers along its handle, briefly, not to use it now, but to feel its weight, to remind yourself of its purpose. In this world, the saw is not an instrument of cruelty, but of strange, desperate mercy. You remove limbs not because you wish to harm, but because the alternative is worse. Infection takes so many so quickly. Amputation, brutal as it seems, is often the only path to survival. You move to the next bed, where a soldier waits with a wound in his thigh. It is deep but clean, the kind of wound you can tend without removing a limb. You clean it gently, your cloth soft against the broken skin, your voice even softer as you whisper to him, telling him he's safe, that you're here, that you will take care of him. You thread the needle with black silk, the thread shining, faintly in the golden light filtering through the canvas. Your stitches are careful, precise, each loop of thread a small act of defiance against the chaos of war. You think of all the things you've sewn closed in this tent flesh, muscle, skin, but also something else, something quieter, fear. You sew fear closed too. Every time you whisper comfort to a man who thinks he won't make it, every time you hold a hand through the worst of the pain, you finish the stitches, tie the knot, and pat the soldier's shoulder gently before moving on. Another man lies nearby, his face flushed with fever, his breathing quick and shallow. You check his pulse, place a cool cloth on his forehead, and whisper to him as you sit beside him, You do not know if he will survive. You do not think about that now. You think only of the next moment, the next breath, the next small act of care. You think of the medicines you have given today, laudanum for pain, blue mass for the sluggish bowels of men confined to cots, quinine when you have it for fever, turpentine when you don't. You think of the maggots you've placed in wounds. To clean away dead tissue, the way they work silently, saving lives in ways that medicine cannot. You've learned not to question these things. In this place, you use whatever works, no matter how strange it seems. You move to the next bed. Another amputation today, this time at the shoulder. The wound was too severe, the bone shattered, the muscles torn beyond repair. The soldier sleeps. Now, the stump wrapped carefully, the silk stitches holding the skin together like a delicate seam in a garment. You wonder how he will feel when he wakes, when he realizes that part of his body is gone. You've seen so many men wake in confusion, looking for limbs that no longer exist, their minds slow to accept what has happened. Some cry softly. Some say nothing at all. You are there for both kinds. You place your hand on his chest briefly, feeling the rise and fall of breath, and you whisper to him, knowing he cannot hear you yet. Still, you speak. Words are part of the healing too. You glance toward the table where your tools rest. The saw, the forceps, the needle and thread. They wait quietly, their work not yet done. You think of the pile of bullets in the bowl nearby, each one a small piece of metal that tore through flesh, that shattered bone that brought men to this place, where you do your work. You do not think of who fired those bullets or why. You think only of the hands that remove them now, the gentle, careful hands that belong to you and the other surgeons here. The war beyond the tent fades into the background. You no longer think of battles or generals or strategies. You think of stitches, of bandages, of soft words spoken in the shadows. You think of the women who wait for letters, the mothers who sew bandages, the wives who send small parcels of comfort. You think of the smuggled medicines, hidden in skirts, carried across lines of battle by women whose courage is never written about in official reports. Their bravery is stitched into every wound you treat, every patient you soothe. You pause for a moment to drink some water, the cup shaking slightly in your hand from fatigue. Your body is tired, but your mind remains soft and steady, wrapped in the quiet hum of the work. You wipe your hands again, adjust your apron, and move to the next patient. His wound is minor, just a cut across the hand, but you treat it with the same care you give to amputations. You clean it, stitch it, wrap it gently. You smile at him as you finish, and he smiles back. These small moments matter. You collect them silently, like stones in a pocket, reminders that not every story ends in loss. The sun continues to fall in the sky, the shadows lengthening, the light inside the tent softening further. You check the patients again, moving. Slowly, your hands practiced, your voice calm. You think of the larger hospitals in the cities, with their clean linens and their organized wards. But you are here, in the field, where the work is raw and immediate, where there are no walls between you and the wounded. You think of the pile of limbs covered quietly outside, the burial details still at work, shoveling earth over the days. Removals. You do not look at the pile. You do not need to. You know it is there. Part of this place, part of this rhythm. You focus instead on the living, on the men who still breathe, who still dream, who still wait for your hands. You continue, one patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. The light fades further, but you do not stop. You move softly through the tent, holding the line between life and death, between memory and sleep, between the harshness of history and the gentle quiet of now. You breathe in, you breathe out, and you continue, never rushing, never stopping. always softly working in the dimming light of the day. The light outside fades into the deeper hues of evening, but within, the tent, the rhythm of the field hospital continues without change. The canvas walls glow softly in the dimming light, their fabric edges outlined by the last rays of the sun slipping beneath the horizon. The heat of the day lingers in the air, mixing with the gentle murmur of breathing, the soft rustle of cloth. As you move between beds, the distant sounds of shovels finishing their work beyond the tent. Your hands are tired, but they do not tremble. They have found their place in this quiet, endless loop of tending to the wounded, of stitching skin, of whispering calm words into ears that may or may not hear them. You no longer think of the hours or the days. The work has become its own kind of time. The man in front of you has survived his surgery for now. His arm was removed earlier in the day, the stump wrapped carefully, the stitches holding the skin together like a seam in worn fabric. You check the wound again, gently pressing around the edges, feeling for heat, for swelling, for signs of infection. None yet. You adjust the bandage with soft hands, your fingers moving slowly, respectfully. You murmur to him as you work, telling him he is doing well, that he is safe for now, that he is strong. Whether he hears you does not matter. The words float into the air anyway, joining the soft symphony of this place. Another patient lies nearby, his face damp with sweat, his breathing shallow but steady, but steady. His fever is still high, but you have seen worse. You place a cool cloth on his forehead, adjusting it gently as you whisper to him. You talk of ordinary things, of rivers and trees and the sound of rain tapping on rooftops. You speak of home, though you do not know where his home is, because it does not matter. The idea of home is enough. It is an anchor, a soft weight to hold on to in the drifting fog of pain and exhaustion. You think again of the medicines you've used today. The small bottle of laudanum is nearly empty now, the blue mass running low, the quinine gone except for the trace amounts you save for the worst fevers. You think of the mustard plasters applied to chests, the poke root rubbed into skin for the itching that never seems to end. You think of the maggots wriggling quietly in wounds, doing their strange but necessary work, eating away the dead tissue to give the living parts a chance to grow. You no longer question these things. They are part of the rhythm now, as natural. To you as the stitching of a wound or the adjusting of a bandage. You wipe your hands again, though they are already clean enough for this place. The cloth is stained and worn, but the act of wiping calms you. It is part of the ritual, part of the soft structure you've built around yourself to keep moving forward. You check the tools on the table, the saw resting quietly, the blade still sharp despite the day's work, the forceps lying neatly beside it, the needle and thread waiting, coiled like a thin black river ready to sew flesh closed again. You think of how these tools have become part of your hands now, extensions of your breath, your heartbeat, your quiet determination to continue. Another patient arrives, carried in by two stretcher bearers with tired faces. The man is unconscious, his leg mangled beyond saving. You prepare for amputation once more, the routine soft in your mind, familiar like a lullaby you've sung too. Many times. You tie the tourniquet, press the chloroform cloth to his face, and watch his breathing slow. When he sleeps, you begin. The saw moves back and forth, the sound soft, almost like brushing wood in a quiet workshop. You cut through muscle, through bone, through the delicate structures of the body that once carried this man across fields and rivers. You do not think of the leg now in your hands. You think only of the life in front of you, of the small chance you are giving him to wake again, to see another morning. You sew the stump closed carefully, tying the arteries, stitching the skin. You wrap the wound, whisper to him softly, telling him he will wake soon. You hope he does. You move to the next bed, where another man waits. His wound is small, cut across the palm, but you treat it with the same care you give to amputations. You clean it, stitch it closed, wrap it gently. You smile at him, and he smiles back. A brief, shared moment of humanity in this place that so often hovers close to the edge of death. You think of the other doctors here, their faces lined with fatigue, their eyes shadowed by too many nights like this. Some sit quietly for a moment, resting against the canvas walls, their hands still stained, but their shoulders relaxing briefly before the next case. You are all part of this strange family now, bound together by the work, by the sawdust on the floor, by the shared silence of knowing too much. You glance at the pile of bullets collected today, small bits of metal removed from bodies, each one a story, a moment, a pain carried out of flesh by careful hands. You do not count them. You do not need to. You know that tomorrow there will be more. The sun is nearly set now, the shadows long and soft across the tent floor. The burial detail has finished for the day, the latest pile of limbs covered with earth behind the hospital. No one speaks of it, but everyone knows. You focus instead on the living, on the men who still breathe, who still dream, who still wait for your hands. You adjust another bandage, check another pulse, whisper another. Quiet reassurance. You think of the women who wait far away, sewing bandages by candlelight, sending letters, waiting for news that may never come. You think of the men who will write home soon, missing arms or legs, carrying scars not just on their bodies, but in their minds. You wonder what stories they will tell, and which parts they will leave out. You check your tools again, wiping them softly, preparing for the next case even as the day fades into night. You think of the general hospitals in the cities, with their clean walls and orderly rows of beds. But you are here, in the field, where the work is raw and immediate, where the lines between medicine and memory are blurred by sweat and whispered prayers. You continue your work, one patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. The light softens further, the air cooling slightly as evening settles. But you do not stop. You move through the tent, your hands calm, your heart steady. You hold the line between life and death, between memory and sleep, between the sharp edges of history and the soft blur of now. You breathe in, you breathe out, and you continue softly, endlessly, quietly, into the fading light. The evening settles over the camp with a softness that almost feels merciful, a gentle cooling of the air after the long, heavy heat of the day. Inside the field hospital, the work does not stop. It never stops. The canvas walls are now painted with shadows, their fabric shifting slightly with the breeze that slips in through small openings left untied. Lanterns are lit, their flames low and flickering, casting pools of warm gold over the faces of the theme. Wounded, over the tools laid out on the tables, over your own hands as you wipe them again, even though you know by now that the act is more ritual than reality. The cloth is stained, the water no longer clear, but the motion calms you. It prepares you for the next task, the next patient, the next life that needs your steady breath and your gentle hands. You move softly between the beds, checking stitches, adjusting bandages, listening for the subtle changes in breathing that tell you more than any words could. Some of the men are sleeping now, their bodies exhausted beyond language, their minds drifting in fever dreams or the blank space of exhaustion. Others lie awake, their eyes reflecting the lantern light, watching the shadows move across the canvas. Walls. You speak to them in soft tones, whispering reassurances even when you are not sure they can hear you. Words, you have learned, are part of the medicine here. They stitch wounds in ways needles cannot. You sit beside one man whose fever has not broken, his skin hot beneath your hand. You place a fresh cloth on his forehead, cooled in the last bit of clean water you could find. You whisper to him about home, about fields of wheat swaying in the wind, about the smell of fresh bread and the sound of rain on rooftops. You do not know where he is from, but you know these images belong to all of you now. They are shared stories, borrowed comfort, a soft place for the mind to go when the body is too far gone. You check his pulse again, slow but steady, and you stay with him for a while longer before moving on. Another man waits, his leg removed earlier today. The stump is clean for now, the stitches holding well. You adjust the bandages, careful not to disturb the healing skin. You think of how many times your hands have done this, how many limbs you've removed, how many wounds you've closed, how many lives you've tried to save. The number is too large to carry in your mind, so you stop trying. You think in moments instead, in breaths, in stitches, in the soft hum of lantern light and the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You glance at the saw resting quietly on the table, its handle smooth from use. The blade is clean now, waiting for the next need. You touch it briefly, not to use it, but as part of the ritual. The saw is not an enemy here. It is a strange kind of friend, a tool of mercy in a world where infection moves faster than healing. You think of the tools you have come to know so well, the forceps that pull bullets from flesh, the needle that closes the skin, the thread that ties life back together, one loop at a time. You think of the bowl of bullets collected today, each one a small, cold reminder of the violence beyond this tent. You do not think of who fired them. You think only of who carried them out of bodies, who stitched the wounds left behind. Another patient arrives, carried in by stretcher bearers whose faces are pale with fatigue. The man on the stretcher is conscious, his eyes wide with pain, his mouth set in a tight line. His hand clutches his side, where blood seeps between his fingers. You kneel beside him, your voice soft, your hands steady. You clean the wound gently, pressing the cloth against the torn flesh, whispering to him about breathing slowly, about staying with you, about letting you help. The bullet is lodged deep, too close to organs you cannot reach safely. You remove what you can, but you know the rest will remain, buried beneath the skin, a silent hidden threat. You give him laudanum for the pain, whispering again as his eyelids flutter and his breath steadies. You stay beside him for a while, holding his hand, listening to the soft rasp of his breathing. These moments are part of the work too, the sitting, the holding, the witnessing. You think of the women who wait at home, sewing bandages, writing letters, sending small parcels of food and comfort. You think of the mothers who will read the letters you've written, for the men who cannot hold a pen, your own hand shaping the words of farewell, of love, of courage. You try to make the letters gentle, leaving out the details of the saw, of the piles of limbs covered with earth behind the tent, of the maggots in wounds. You write instead of bravery, of dignity, of the soft kindness of the surgeons and nurses who stood beside the dying until the very end. You hope the words bring comfort. You hope they do not haunt. The lantern light shifts as one is refilled with oil, the flame flickering brighter for a moment before settling again. You adjust your apron, wipe your hands once more, and move to the next bed. Another soldier waits, his arm shattered by a bullet. You feel the fragments of bone beneath the skin as you probe the wound gently, your fingers soft, your voice softer. You know the arm cannot be saved. You prepare for amputation again, the steps so familiar now that you move through them without thinking. You tie the tourniquet, press the chloroform cloth to his face, and watch his breathing slow. When he sleeps, you begin. The saw moves back and forth, the sound soft and steady, like the brushing of wood in a quiet workshop. You cut carefully, not rushing, your hands guided by habit and care. You hand the limb off to the assistant, who wraps it in cloth and carries. and outside to the growing pile. You do not look. You focus on the stump, tying the arteries, sewing the skin closed, wrapping the bandage gently. You whisper to the sleeping man, telling him he will wake soon, that he is safe now, that the worst is over. You hope he believes you. You move on, your body moving through the motions with a grace born of practice, your mind calm in the softness of the work. You do not think of yourself as a surgeon anymore, or even as a healer. You are part of this place now, part of the rhythm of care and loss, of stitching and whispering, of sitting beside men as they drift between life and death. The night deepens outside, the air cooling, the canvas walls glowing faintly in the lantern light. The sounds of the camp have quieted, the crackle of fires, the soft murmur of men talking low, the distant whinny of a horse. Inside the tent, the work continues. You check the stitches, adjust the bandages, listen to the breathing of the men who sleep, of the men who do not yet know if they will wake. You think of the future, of the day when this tent will come down, when the saw will be packed away, when the war will end. You wonder if your hands will forget how to do this work, or if they will always remember the shape of a limb beneath them, the pull of thread through skin. You suspect the memory will stay. You suspect the rhythm will follow you home, wherever that may be. For now, you continue, one patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. You hold the line between life and death, between memory and sleep, between the sharp history of war and the soft silence of night. You breathe in, you breathe out, and you continue, never rushing, never stopping, always gently moving forward, into the deeper folds of evening. Night has fully wrapped itself around the camp now, soft and heavy, like a woolen blanket draped over the distant hills. The lanterns inside the hospital tent flicker quietly, their flames bending slightly with each breath of air that slips through the canvas seams. Outside, the soldiers who are not wounded settle into uneasy sleep beneath the stars, while inside, you continue your quiet work, the same gentle rhythm that has carried you through the day, now extending into the night. Your hands are steady, though your body aches. You move softly between the beds, your footsteps careful, your voice always low. The men who sleep here have earned a silence that is different from ordinary rest, a silence that holds pain at bay, that keeps nightmares from breaking through too harshly. You kneel beside a soldier whose breathing is shallow, his fever unrelenting. You check his pulse again, pressing your fingers gently to his wrist, feeling the flutter beneath the skin. His wound was simple, a bullet through the thigh butt. The infection has made it complicated. You've cleaned it, sewn it closed, whispered comfort as he drifted into a haze of fever. Now you sit beside him, your hand resting lightly on his arm, breathing with him, matching your rhythm to his. Sometimes this is all you can do. Sometimes it is enough. You think of the camp, outside the tent, the crackling of fires, the soft murmur of men talking quietly, sharing stories in the dark. You wonder what they are saying, whether they talk of home, of battles past, of food or families, or the strange softness of moments like this, when war seems to pause just long enough for the night to feel almost normal. You know that by morning, the cannons will start again, the wounded will return, and the saw will hum softly in your hands once more. But for now, there is this quiet space, this gentle unfolding of night. You check the tools again, wiping them as you always do. The saw, the forceps, the needle, and thread all laid out neatly, their surfaces catching the lantern light in soft reflections. You do not think of them as sharp or cruel anymore. You think of them as companions, extensions of your own body, necessary parts of the strange world you inhabit now. The saw has become as familiar to you as a pen is to a writer or a brush to an artist. You remember your first surgery months ago, your hands shaking as you cut, your stomach tight with fear. Now, Your hands do not tremble. They move calmly, gently, understanding that this work is not about violence, but about giving life a chance, however fragile. Another patient stirs, calling out softly in his sleep. You lean close, listening. His words are soft, mixed with the echoes of memory and fever. He is speaking to someone far away, perhaps his mother, perhaps a wife, perhaps a friend lost on the battlefield. You place your hand gently on his shoulder, whispering to him, bringing him back to the present, reminding him that he is here, that he is safe for now, that you are watching over him. You do not wake him fully. Sleep is a kind of medicine, too. You move to the next bed, where a soldier's chest rises and falls in slow, steady breaths. His wound is clean, the stitches holding, the bandage soft beneath your fingers as you check for bleeding. None today. You allow yourself a small breath of relief, though you know the night is long and infection can come quickly. You think of all the things you've seen in this tent: limbs removed, lungs filled with fluid, wounds packed with cloth to stop the bleeding. You think of the men who have lived, the men who have died, the men who will carry their scars home to families. Who cannot imagine what happened here? You think of the mothers waiting for letters, the women sewing bandages, the smuggled medicines hidden in skirts and petticoats, carried quietly through the lines to make nights like this one just a little more bearable. You think of the letters you've written today, your own handwriting shaping the words for soldiers too weak to write. You think of the lies you've told, gentle lies, soft lies, the kind that soothe more than they deceive. He died quickly. He felt no pain. He spoke of home. These are the phrases you use, not because you are dishonest, but because you understand the weight of truth in a time like this. Sometimes kindness matters more than accuracy. You move quietly through the tent, adjusting lanterns, straightening blankets, checking pulses. You stop beside the amputation table, wiping it down once more, even though it is already clean. The pile of limbs outside has been buried for the day, covered with earth as the sun went down. No one speaks of it. It is just part of the rhythm now. You think of the surgeons around you, some sitting quietly in corners, their eyes heavy, their hands resting in their laps. You are all part of this machine, this quiet engine of care and loss, of stitching and cutting, of breathing beside men who may not wake by morning. You do not question it anymore. You do not fight it. You simply continue. You think of the future again, of the day when this war will end, when the tents will be taken down, when the saw will be stored away. You wonder if you will ever forget the sound of it, the soft back and forth hum of blade on bone. You wonder if your hands will ever forget the shape of a stump beneath them, the way silk thread feels as it pulls through skin. You do not know, but you do know that tonight you are still here. The lantern light hums softly. The shadows shift gently across the canvas walls, and the breathing of the wounded forms a soft, steady rhythm around you. You check another bandage, adjust another pillow, sit quietly beside another man whose fever has not yet broken. You breathe in, you breathe out. The night holds you in its gentle grip, and you continue one patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one quiet breath after another. You hold the line between life and death, between memory and forgetting, between the sharp facts of war and the soft edges of sleep. You are part of this night now, woven into its fabric, your hands steady, your voice calm, your heart soft. You continue softly, endlessly, into the deeper folds of darkness. Night has settled fully now, heavy and complete, yet inside the hospital tent, the work continues without interruption, without hesitation, wrapped in the same soft rhythm that has carried you from day into evening, and now into the deep, still hours. The lanterns flicker gently, their light warm but small against the vastness of the darkness beyond the canvas walls. You move softly through the tent, your footsteps barely making a sound on the packed earth beneath you. The breathing of the May. Men forms a quiet chorus, some steady and smooth, others shallow, some punctuated by soft moans or whispered words spoken to memories only they can see. You pause beside a man whose stump you checked earlier in the day. His face is pale, his lips dry, but he sleeps now, his body at rest for the first time in hours. You adjust his blanket, smoothing it gently, careful not to wake him. You sit beside him for a moment, just breathing, just being there. In the hush of the night, the smallest acts become profound, the smoothing of cloth, the brushing back of hair, the simple, quiet presence of one human beside another. You think again of the tools you have used today, the saw, the forceps, the thread, all still resting neatly on the table where you left them. You glance at the saw, its blade cleaned, the handle polished by the work of too many hands. It waits silently now, part of the tent's shadows, part of its language. You think of it not as a weapon, but as a strange and necessary companion. The tool that removes death before it spreads, that gives men a chance at life, even when that life will be different from what they imagined. Another soldier stirs in his bed, murmuring softly. You kneel beside him, listening to the fragmented words, names, and places mixed with the fever that clouds his mind. You speak to him quietly, calling him back to this place, to the present moment, to the soft warmth of the lanterns and the gentle weight of the night. You wipe his forehead, check his pulse, breathe with him until he settles again into sleep. You have learned that this is part of the healing too, not just the stitching and the cutting, but the breathing beside, the whispering softly, the simple act of staying present when the body hovers close to the edge. You move to the next bed, where another man lies quietly, his wound bandaged, his chest rising and falling in an easy rhythm for now. You adjust his bandage, feel for warmth beneath the cloth, and check the stitches you placed there earlier. They are holding. The skin is clean. You allow yourself a small breath of relief, knowing that in this place, even small victories matter. You think of the letters you've written today, your own hand shaping the words of men who cannot hold. A pen telling stories meant for mothers and wives, stories softened to ease the burden of those who wait at home. You have learned how to craft these letters carefully, leaving out the details of the saw, of the piles of limbs, of the smell of gangrene rising in the heat of the afternoon. You write instead of bravery, of dignity, of final moments filled with love. You hope these words bring comfort. You hope they hold the pain at bay for just a little while. You think of the burial pits outside, now quiet, the day's work covered with earth as the night descended. The shovels rest for now, but they will be picked up again tomorrow. You do not think of the pile of limbs anymore. It has become part of the background, part of the routine, part of the quiet agreement you have made with this place, that you will continue to do the work, no matter how heavy it becomes. You check another patient, this one awake, his eyes watching you as you move. You smile softly, kneeling beside him, adjusting his bandage, whispering that he is safe for now, that he is strong, that he has done well. His eyes soften in response, his breath slowing just a little. You pat his arm, gently before moving on. The lanterns cast long shadows now, stretching across the tent floor like rivers of gold and darkness. You adjust one of them, refilling the oil, trimming the wick so the flame burns steadily. The light is needed, not just for the work, but for the comfort it brings. Darkness can be frightening here, a space where memories rise too quickly, where pain feels sharper. The lanterns hold the night at bay, just enough to make the tent feel like a softer place. You think again of the women who smuggle medicines through blockades, who sew bandages by candlelight, who wait for news with hands that twist cloth and prayers together in the same motion. You think of the supplies you have used today, the last of the quinine given to a man with malaria, the blue mass administered to someone too weak to move his bowels, the opium plugs placed gently to stop the flow of dysentery, the turpentine, rubbed into wounds when nothing else is left. You have learned to use whatever is available. You have learned to accept the limitations of this time, this war, this life. You do not think of the books you read before the war, the theories that felt clean and neat. The reality here is messier, quieter, slower. It is about holding hands, about sitting beside fevered men, about listening for breath and knowing when. It is time to stop trying to save and start simply witnessing. You glance at the sky through the small cracks in the canvas walls. The stars are bright now, scattered across the blackness like grains of salt on dark cloth. You think of the men who lie beneath those stars, the ones who are not wounded tonight, who sit quietly around fires, who whisper to each other in low voices, sharing stories that may never be written down. You think of the surgeons who sit beside you in this tent, their faces pale with exhaustion, their hands stained like yours. You are all part of this night now, part of this strange, quiet work of holding life together in a place where it so easily falls apart. You sip a little water, your throat dry from so many whispered words, from so many hours spent speaking softly into ears that may or may not hear. You wipe your hands again, though the cloth is no cleaner than before. You check the tools, laying them out carefully, preparing for the next case even as the night deepens. You do not stop. You move to the next bed, and the next, and the next, your hands steady, your heart soft, your breath calm. You continue one patient at a time, one stitch at a time, one breath at a time. You hold the line between life and death, between memory and sleep, between the sharp edge of war and the gentle quiet of now. The lanterns flicker, the shadows shift, the night wraps around you like a soft cloak, and you continue endlessly, gently, into the deeper folds of silence. The night has deepened into its final, quiet hours, when even the insects in the grass outside seem to still their songs, and the world beyond the canvas walls becomes a soft, invisible space of shadows and silence. Inside the field hospital, the lanterns burn low, their flames small but steady, casting pools of golden light that seem suspended in air. You are still moving, still breathing, still tending to the wounded in the same gentle rhythm that carried you through the day, into evening, and now into the long stretch of night. Your body aches, but you no longer register it as pain. It has become part of the fabric of the work, woven into the soft repetition of stitching, whispering, adjusting, and caring. You move quietly from bed to bed, your hands light, your voice softer still, careful not to disturb the men who have finally fallen into sleep. Some of them will wake in the morning, their wounds healing slowly, their bodies adjusting to new shapes, new lives. Others will not wake, their breathing too shallow, their fevers too high. You do not think of this now. You think only of the next breath, the next moment of care, the next small gesture of kindness that fills this place with something gentler than war. You check the stitches on a soldier's stump, the silk thread glinting faintly in the dim light. The wound is clean for now, the bandage wrapped carefully, the skin warm but not yet hot with infection. You breathe out softly, allowing yourself a moment of quiet relief. You adjust his blanket, smoothing the edges, tucking him in as you might tuck in a child before sleep. You sit beside him for a moment, listening to his breath, letting your own breathing matches. A quiet connection shared in the dark. You move to the next bed, where another man lies still, his lips parted, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that is both fragile and steady. His wound is deep but closed, stitched by your own hand hours ago. You check the bandage, feel for the pulse in his wrist, whisper a soft word to him, even though his eyes remain closed. You think again of the women who wait far away, the letters you have written, the stories you have softened, so that the mothers and wives and sisters who read them will imagine something quieter, something kinder than what truly happens here. You have become fluent in this softening, in this careful balance between truth and mercy. You think of the soldiers outside the tent, sleeping beneath the stars, their bodies wrapped in blankets, their minds caught in uneasy dreams of battlefields and home. You think of the surgeons around you, some resting now, their heads tilted, back against the canvas walls, their eyes closed but not fully asleep. You are all bound together in this strange, endless work, the stitching of bodies, the soothing of pain, the holding of hands as life flickers between staying and leaving. You check the tools once more. The saw rests on the table, the blade cleaned, the handle smooth. The forceps lie beside it, the needle threaded with black silk, the thread coiled gently, ready for the next wound. You do not think of the pile of limbs buried outside tonight, though you know it is there, beneath the earth, another quiet part of this hospital story. You think instead of the breaths you have counted, the pulses you have held, the moments you have whispered into the dark. You think of the way your hands have become steady, not from lack of feeling, but from understanding that care is a kind of repetition, a soft practice that does not end. You check another patient, his fever breaking. At last, his body cooler beneath your hand. You adjust his pillow, offer him a sip of water, and watch as his lips move softly around the cup. He smiles faintly, his eyes meeting yours for just a moment before closing again. These are the moments you hold on to, the small victories, tiny, flickering lights in the darkness. You sit beside him for a while, letting the rhythm of his breath settle into your own. Outside, the night shifts toward morning, though no one marks the time here. You are beyond clocks now, beyond hours. You are part of a softer rhythm, one that is measured in stitches and sighs, in whispered prayers and the warmth of a hand held gently in yours. You think of the end of the war, of the day when the tents will come down, when the saws will be stored away, when the bandages will be folded for the last time. You wonder who you will be then, if your hands will forget this work, if your mind will stop hearing the soft scrape of the saw and the quiet of the night. You suspect it will stay with you, part of your breath, part of your memory, part of the rhythm of your life. The lanterns burn lower now, the oil nearly gone, the flames small but still enough to light your way. You continue your work, moving softly between the men who sleep, checking pulses, smoothing cloth, whispering into the dim air. You hold the line between life and death, between history and forgetting, between the sharp edge of war and the soft quiet of care. You breathe in, you breathe out. The night holds you gently, wrapping you in its silence, and you continue softly, endlessly, into the final folds of sleep.